Thank you for joining us tonight on another episode of Breaking Reality. My name is Joshua McGuire, and I'll be your host tonight. And our guest this evening with us is a very dear friend of mine, Melvin Nix. Melvin, it's great to have you on again, buddy. Our last show we was discussing what is energy, and this show we're going to continue what we started on that and continue a series. And I'm looking forward to tonight's show. I'm not going to give too many spoilers away about what you talked about. But Melvin, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself? That way people understand where you're coming from and your viewpoints. And then we'll just dive right into this conversation. I'm looking forward to this one tonight.
Absolutely, Josh. As always, it's been a pleasure getting another opportunity to be back on the show. You're one of my dearest friends, and it's just been an awesome thing how when we talk, the different things that we uncover, and how I feel we're both growing spiritually as we get into various topics and things of that nature. And so I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to be back on the platform and to see you again and to be able to do another deep dive. So I've been, really excited about this opportunity to talk about the subject matter for tonight. I think is interesting, and I hope that the audience will definitely leave with some good knowledge to go and do their own homework and hopefully see some results in it. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, my name is Melvin Nix. To those who don't know me, I am a spiritual teacher, and part of what I do is I have a website called New You, but it's spelled differently. It's not N-E-U. I actually adopted the word new from the Greek word pneuma, which is Pneuma, and the word pneuma means spirit. So what I've done is on my website and a lot of other things that, a lot of information that I put out, I talk about how we are spiritual beings. We're not earthly beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. And I believe that in order to make any changes in your life, in order to really see any type of transformation on any level, you have to work with your spirit and you have to acknowledge the fact that you're a spiritual being. When we look at the world and we see how things are going and just the way that the world is going, a lot of people don't understand that we live in a bubble. And that bubble that we live in is not a very spiritual one. People in the world they're not cognizant of the fact that we're spiritual beings and they don't deal with spiritual principles. Instead, everyone's just kind of, being selfish, and they have a mentality of getting what they can get. This is a dog eat dog world. In order to succeed, I got to make sure you lose, that kind of mentality. And it's really crazy if you want to, seriously look at it and look at how this world is running. But I personally believe, that we are spiritual beings, and in order to make a difference in our individual lives and in this world, that you have to operate with and flow in harmony with spiritual principles and grow and evolve as a spiritual person. I hope that makes sense, Josh, with my
It makes
babbling,
absolute
but
sense to me, but you're also preaching to the choir right here. But yeah, I mean, to me, it makes absolute sense what you just said. Like it's just
yeah. A little bit of my background. I came from the church. I was born. I wasn't literally born and raised in church, but pretty close to that. Where I stayed in church the majority of my youth. My mom kept us there, and I appreciate her for that because it allowed me to develop my spiritual basis. But as an adult, going to church and listening to different sermons and starting to read the Bible for myself, I began to see some things that didn't measure up and that didn't make sense. And I had a lot of questions about things. And what I discovered was when you have real spiritual questions, oftentimes people who don't know the answers will either get offended at you or they'll rule it down to some things we just aren't supposed to understand. But then on the opposite side of the same mouth, they'll say, well, God wants you to know things about your life. And so I would go round and round with certain people and ask them questions that I felt were fundamental, if you're going to be a spiritual person and really walk the walk that we would hear about in Sunday school and in Bible study. And when you read the Bible for yourself, you see all these amazing things that were done. But then again, if the Bible's a book for today, why don't we see the miracles happening today? Why don't we see people doing the one commandment that Jesus left? He actually left two, but the most important one was to love your neighbor as yourself. And we have, tons of evidence of people who say that they are spiritual people, but they don't love their brother, they don't love their sister. And so I was looking at the world and looking at my own life and looking at things that I didn't really feel, were coherently making any sense to me when I thought about my spirituality. So to make a long story short, I decided to just kind of start over and kind of just wipe my mind in a way of, religious teachings that I've heard. I completely left church altogether because I didn't like a lot of the things that I was seeing with some of the doctrines that I felt were really not biblical and were really enslaving people in a sense, not physically, but in the part that matters the most, in your mind,
Right.
And I didn't agree with a lot of those things. So I gracefully bowed out of the church and decided to go on my own path and to talk directly to God or source or the universe. I don't use labels like I used to, but I do believe that something put everything into motion, and that something made us, and that something made this entire world, and that something is available to all of us. And so with my background, I still read the Bible, but the Bible's not the only book that I read. It's not the only book that I research. But the thing that I find interesting is, with all of my biblical knowledge, when I look into science, when I look into other spiritual texts, I see where there are so many principles that are identical. And it's just a matter of where you got it from. It's like if I learned algebra from one teacher over here, but then I meet another teacher and I ask them the same question, they give me some more information that maybe the first teacher didn't cover off on. And that kind of fills in the gaps and gives you a better perspective and gives you a better understanding of things, in my opinion. So that's kind of been my approach. The Bible is still a book that I use, but there's a scripture that's in the Bible that I totally agree with. And this scripture says that the word of God is alive and powerful. And when I read that scripture after I left the church, it made so much more sense to me, because what it meant to me was the word of God is not the book. The book may make reference to God, but if the word of God is alive, that means that God is still talking, right? That's kind of how I view things. And since I've taken that posture, I've learned so much and have seen so many different things in my life that have been great. And I'm hoping to share those things with you all tonight. And hopefully, if you're not on the spiritual path, I encourage you to find what fits you and begin to walk and see some miracles in your life. I totally believe that's possible.
Absolutely. When you mentioned that scripture there about the word of God being alive, it reminded me of one of my favorite Terence McKenna quotes, because when you think of the word, creation came from the word. God spoke things into creation. And so this quote is, the syntactical nature of reality. The real secret of magic is that the world is made up of words. And if you know the words that the world is made of, you can make of it whatever you wish.
Wow.
That's a Terence McKenna quote.
That's awesome.
And one of my favorite quotes by Terence McKenna. And when you said that, that just came to mind. I happen to have that quote sitting right next to me too.
Well, I promise that we won't be on the Bible study too much longer tonight, but I would like to cover up on a couple of scriptures that I think are relevant to this topic that we're having.
Absolutely. And backing some of this stuff with different things from different viewpoints is always a good way to go. So I'm looking forward to getting into this. So let's start this and dive in.
All right, great. So the first thing that I like to do is have you turn. I asked Josh previously, audience, to get his Bible so that he can kind of be with me. But if you have one, go ahead and grab it. I think you may get something out of this, or you can just feel free to listen to it and look at it later on. But I'm going to be looking at the Gospel of Matthew.
And I've got the trusty Strong's Concordance if you need me to go to it too.
Awesome. And to those of you who are not familiar with the concordance, I highly recommend that you either look online, because they have great ones online, or you buy one if the Bible is a book that you like to study, because the Bible was originally written in two different languages. You have the Old Testament, which was written in Aramaic, and then you have the New Testament, which was written and translated into Greek. Jesus actually spoke Aramaic, but the New Testament was translated into Greek. And so we have, not getting too much into history, but the Bible has gone through a lot of different hands touching it and a lot of modifications and things of that nature, a lot of different translations. But I personally like to take the old school King James Bible and a concordance, because what that allows me to do is to look at the words that were translated in order to see what the words actually meant, rather than what may have been added by a translator. So get you a good concordance and learn how to look up those numbers. You may learn some things that'll blow your mind. Now, you may not be friends with a lot of Christian people after you get some real spiritual knowledge, but the most important thing is that you learn as an individual and you're able to influence, your life, and hopefully the people around you will follow suit when they see you elevating. So, anyway, Matthew chapter 13. Now, the reason why I'm going into this particular chapter is because I like to, when I embark on any spiritual study or any spiritual topic, I think it's important to understand why you're doing this particular study. Why look into anything from a spiritual nature? You have those who are, intellectuals, and they like to sit around and have their beverage, put their feet up, and they debate and talk about lots of spiritual stuff, and that's fun. It's great. It's fun to do from time to time. Josh and I, on our phone calls, we pretty much are transcribing things into stone almost that the next generation will find.
We get deep on some of our calls on things.
Yeah, but it's important for me anyway, I think it's important to look into why you're doing something, because if you understand why, then I believe that it'll help your mind to be open, and it'll help you to receive information, and it'll motivate you to continue, because you'll find one thing that'll lead to the next, that'll lead to the next, and then you'll see the whole puzzle coming together. So tonight we're going to be talking about the chakras and how they work, what they are, how to use them. I'm sure a lot of the audience on this particular program are familiar with chakras, because you've probably heard of them a million times, but tonight we're going to get into an in-depth discussion on them. And one of the things that, like I was saying, is why study the chakras? What's the importance of it? It's cool when you see things in movies like Doctor Strange where they talk about chakras, or, if you go to any YouTube channel and type up spirituality, someone at some point are going to talk about energy, they're going to talk about chakras, they're going to talk about light and things of that nature. But, Josh, I'll ask you, have you ever, just thought about why look into the chakras?
To me, it just came naturally to look into them. I mean, it was just, as soon as I learned what the chakras were, it just made sense. But that's also one of those things that, for me, I mean, going back and some of the things that we've talked about with the way I was initiated into things in my early years, I was shown a lot of stuff that I didn't fully understand. But then once I learned what it was, everything just, the pieces just fell together.
Yeah, that's oftentimes how it happens. It literally, when you're able to start with that first puzzle piece, and you start digging around, the next one comes and the next one comes, and it's just amazing.
To me, a real simple way to describe chakras is to think of like a circuit board, and that the energy has to travel through that circuit board in a particular pattern for everything
Yep.
to line up and to work properly. And that's kind of how the chakras are. Our energy, because we're energetic beings, the energy has to travel through those chakras in a certain way for certain
Right.
things to activate. So that to me, that's just a real simple way of understanding chakras is it is the circuit board of your energetic body, and that if those things are blocked or shut off or not functioning properly, there's going to be problems. You're not going to be able to complete that circuit that you need to. And with the chakras, when you complete that circuit, the end of the circuit is connecting to the divine.
That's right.
So lining up those chakras right, and learning how to work with the chakras and how to move the energy through the chakras is part of the process of making that divine connection.
That's couldn't say it any better. When we get into really once we get past this one scripture that I'm going to introduce, because I promise not to have a long Bible study, we're going to get into a little bit of that. But before we even go that far, have you ever wondered why, even with our bodies, as you were explaining, we have different layers. We have our physical body, we have our spiritual body, we have, our auric field. There's just so many layers to how we're made. But the English language is amazing. And a lot of times when you're doing spiritual studies, I highly encourage you just to think about the words that are being utilized when you think about who we are and how we're made. For example, Josh, you just made the point about the electric circuit. Think about what they call the most fundamental part of our body. When we are conceived, what happens is that cells start, once the sperm and the egg fertilize, that cell starts to divide. But notice they call it a cell. What else is called a cell? In electrical terms.
Right, a battery.
A battery.
Yep.
Because batteries store electricity, and when you plug them up right, they're able to transmit electricity throughout a circuit.
Right.
And so we operate just like that, but it's on a subtle level. It's at a level to where we can't see things with our physical eyes all the time, but certain people who are enlightened can get a glimpse of that. And now with modern technology, we can see subtle hints, but we are very electrical. Spirituality is
I mean, just by saying we're very electrical, look at what they do when you go to a hospital. If you're having heart problems, they put you on an EKG. They're reading the electrical pulses in your body with that.
That's right.
They're reading the electrical transmissions that are going through all of your body that are operating your heart, and they're studying those. Every impulse in the brain is an electrical impulse.
That's right. And even when you do Earth, the Earth is nothing but a big electromagnet, because we have a north and we have a south pole. We spin around on an axis, and the Earth generates electromagnetic energy and creates an electromagnetic field. But we're going to get into that a little bit later.
So, we're going to talk about the Schumann resonance.
We may not get into it exactly with the Schumann resonance, but we'll get really close to it. So, but let's go ahead and jump into the scripture, Matthew chapter 13. And we'll start at verse 18, and I'll read it, but I'll give the background of this. This particular scripture that we're going to read is a parable. And what a parable was a teaching that explained a spiritual concept. It's kind of like fables, where, Mother Goose, will talk about different things, but they have a deeper meaning. They may deal with, an animal in different scenarios, but at the end of the day, there's a deeper spiritual meaning behind the concept. And this particular scripture that I'm going to read, Jesus said, was the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Now, if you look into the teachings of Jesus, apart from religion, apart from a church mindset, but with open eyes, you'll come to discover Jesus talked a lot about the fact that we are spiritual beings, and the fact that we are responsible for our lives, that God does not come down out of heaven and change your life. And even when you pray about stuff, God doesn't fix your life. The responsibility lies on you, the individual. And the thing that I think is so cool is that Jesus being a representative, according to the Bible, he was the Son of God that came to show us how to be sons of God. And he literally left instructions. But a lot of people don't see that and they don't understand that because they go to churches and a lot of times the ministers don't know what they're talking about. They're teaching stuff that makes no sense, and people come to them with questions and they leave with no answers. And so they get frustrated when they don't know what the Bible means because, if you look at the King James Version, you have all the these and the thous and the Elizabethan English, and you just kind of get lost. But hopefully we can clear some of that up. So anyway, this particular parable, Jesus said, was the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And when you look into what the kingdom of heaven is, the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to when you die. It is not some place where, if I can just hold on to this life until I die, everything will be great and I'll be in the kingdom of God and everything will be great and peaceful and rainbows and unicorns. No. Jesus had every intention that you live on this earth as a God right here and right now, and he explains how to do it. So in this particular chapter of Matthew, this is called the parable of the sower. So I'll read it here. It says, "Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When one hears the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catches away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which receives seed by the wayside." The next verse in verse 20. "But he that receiveth the seed into stony places, the same is he that hears the word and anon with joy receives it. Yet he has no root in himself, but dureth for a while, for when tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, by and by he is offended. He also that receives seed among the thorns is he that hears the word, and the care of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful." Now look at the last one here that we're going to read in verse 23. "But he that receives seed into the good ground is he that hears the word and understands it, which also bears fruit, and bringeth forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Okay, now what this scripture is dealing with is, if you look at it closely, Jesus is using the illustration of a person, like he says a sower, which would have been like a farmer. And the farmer is sowing seeds, whether it's, apple seeds or beans or whatever he's planting. But the focus is on the condition of the soil that the seed is being put into. Now, notice that he deals with different types of soil. He says that there is, like in chapter 19, the seed doesn't even get planted because it gets stolen. Now, when he was talking about that, he's basically saying when spiritual information is being given, the person who's teaching that information is sowing that information into your conscious mind, okay? And when that information gets into your conscious mind, if you don't understand it, you can't receive it. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
So when a spiritual principle is being talked about, if you don't understand it, it'll never get into your conscious mind and it won't go any further. So it's been stolen from. Let's look at the next one. He talked about how the stony places is where the person, the soil, the seed is planted into the soil, but it only goes for a little bit of time, because there's no growth that's taking place. So it moves into the conscious mind. The person receives that spiritual information and they may go, wow, I just learned this spiritual thing, but the information has yet to sprout a root and grow a little bit deeper into them. So they may have a little bit of knowledge of the information, but they can't do anything with it. Okay? So that's the stony ground. Then the next ground is where he's talking about how it's sown among thorns. And I love how he says that, because envision it this way. If I give you a spiritual principle, but you want to understand it, you want to believe it, you want to receive it, and you want to do something with it, but you have conflicts in your mind. where you've heard the law of attraction, where they talk about how, thoughts are things, and how that, we can manifest things into our life if we understand how to use that principle. So
Right.
we hear about the law of attraction. We get excited. We're like, man, I'm going to go and I'm going to manifest, I'm going to pay a bill. I'm going to believe that the universe will bring in enough money to cover off on a bill. But you don't understand how the law of attraction works. You just have a little bit of information. So you get discouraged when that bill comes due and the money hasn't arrived.
Right.
And you say, this stuff is a bunch of crap, or, you may be holding on and someone tells you, well, you need to go and do something else because what you're believing isn't working. I think it's a bunch of hogwash, and you believe that and you listen to it. That's just like sowing a seed among thorns. All that other information is choking what you're trying to produce, and it can't grow. Now, when we get into where he said the good soil, the good ground, notice how there's different levels to how the plant grows. There's 100-fold, there's 60, and there's 30, right? So when you receive spiritual information and you begin to walk down that path, you begin to understand some things, you can have manifestations that occur at different levels. So at one level, you may have been able to manifest a healing in your body. It may have been a headache that you had and you were able to deal with the headache. But then let's say further on down the road, you keep on in this spiritual path, you learn more information, and then let's say you get hit with a more serious condition. Now you have something within you to counteract the belief system. I'm not saying don't go to doctors, I'm not saying don't use medicine, but we understand, those who really understand spiritual knowledge, your beliefs are the most powerful thing you have to work with, because they can give you the right medicine, but if you believe you're going to die, you'll die.
Right.
It's all based on how you believe. And when you look into the scriptures, Jesus especially, he used the term faith, but the word faith simply means to believe. And all belief means is what you really accept as being true. So I shared this scripture to hopefully open up a can of worms, in the sense that people will understand as we talk about this information. We're going to be sowing seeds tonight, but open up your mind, open up your insight so that you can really hear and understand, and then go and dig deeper, go and research further so that that information can get embedded and get into your subconscious and get into your spirit, because that's when you will begin to change your behavior. You'll begin to see some growth, and you'll begin to see some manifestations. 160 and 30. You'll begin to see that in your own life. So just wanted to kind of open with that, and hopefully it'll create some form of a curiosity where he's like, this guy just talked about something I may not have heard before, may not have seen it this way, and maybe you'll want to go and dig deeper, because trust me when I tell you, Jesus talked about chakras, he talked about all kinds of things, but if you don't understand the information, it may not make sense.
And like you said, he spoke about it in parables. I actually want to touch on another scripture there in Matthew. It's in the same chapter, Matthew 13:11. And
Okay,
it's where the disciples asked Christ, why do you speak to them in parables? Why are you speaking to the people in parables? Because they were, they were just kind of awed by why do you speak this way? And he says, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. The disciples knew the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. They were chosen to walk with Christ for a reason, because of their understanding of these mysteries. They were mystics. The general masses who did not have this knowledge needed to be presented this knowledge in a manner that they could understand. And that's why he used parables to describe the way that he was passing on this knowledge. So when we read these parables, they're not meant to be taken just as straight literal stories. They're metaphors for spiritual teachings.
Absolutely.
So as we go through this, make sure as you hear us talking about things, we may speak in in metaphors and parables at different times and trying to describe this stuff. And it's
And
because it's our way of relating this to people in an understandable manner. Like I use we use the analogies of a circuit board and batteries already.
that's right.
You know, so we'll be going into some probably pretty interesting things here in the next.
How are we doing on time?
We're 30 minutes in, so we got.
Okay.
And I tell you what, with this one, I'm not going to worry about time too much. We'll take what we need, and when we get to the point to where we're going to stop, because you'll be back next month to continue on in this series. We've already got you scheduled.
All right.
And so we've got time.
Great. To the point you're making about the disciples, and the reason why I brought this whole thing up again with spirituality is because in my personal life, there had to be a transition that occurred, because on the one hand, when I grew up in church, I was taught to have an expectation that God was going to, if I could just believe God and trust God and follow the Bible and go to church and do all the right things, that God would be there to change my life. And I found out that is not how it happens. And I would get angry. I would look at the Bible, but again, I'm looking at the Bible through glasses that are filtered with religion. So I didn't see the truths there. But when I got out of church and I took all of that stuff off, I tried to walk completely away. And I have stories I can tell you on that, but I'll get into that stuff later. But I started finding out that in the Bible, God expects us to be responsible for our lives. He expects us to change our lives. He expects us to take everything that he has put within us and do something about it. Even in this parable that Josh and I just read, if you look before into the, let's see, I believe it's the 9th verse, or a little bit before that, the disciples actually were in the crowd where Jesus taught this at first. But when I read it, I was reading a recap that Jesus gave the disciples because they came to him later, because they didn't even understand what in the world this parable was about. Now, there's an interesting dynamic that you see when you study the relationship Jesus had with his 12. He was a master teacher. And the reason why I say that is because, like any good teacher, he gave you a test. So with the disciples, he told, they were with him all the time. So he explained this, he taught this parable into a group of people, and they did not receive the information, and his disciples didn't get it either. So they came to him later on. They said, Master, what does this mean? And he kind of chews them out, because he said, it's for you to know this. And when you look in other scriptures in the Bible, like there's a scripture where Jesus was in the bottom of the boat asleep, and a storm came. And they woke Jesus up, and Jesus went, and the first thing he did was he stopped the storm, but he chewed his disciples out. The word that's in the Bible is rebuke.
Yep.
And I was wondering, why did he chew them out? For waking him up, because they could have died. Because, but what I found,
because he told them that they have the power to do that, and they should have done it instead of calling upon him to do it.
Exactly. And so when you get into spirituality, and I'm using the Bible a lot because that's my background, but again, I don't stop there. And I encourage anyone to do all the studies, but what you'll see is this pattern. Jesus taught a spiritual principle. He expected his disciples to not only hear it and understand it, but to go and do something with it. He even said, the things that I do, greater work shall you do. And so I believe that in order to do anything in this world that we live in, yes, spiritual power is very real. And yes, we can do something in our lives, even on a small scale, but it takes comprehending spiritual laws and principles enough to be able to work with it, to be able to operate with it. So when we give this, to bring this whole little Bible study, to a close in a sense, I brought all this up because I want you to be able to understand not only what the chakras are, but to do something, to begin to see changes in your life by taking the information that we're going to cover and doing something. It's great to have a diagram of chakras on your wall. It looks great. The symbols look cool. And, it's fun coffee conversation to have with people to go, oh, yes, I know what chakras are. But have you changed your life? Have you began working with your life. I mean, none of us are a finished work. I'm totally not anywhere near being where I want to be in my life, but I'm doing something with the information that I have. And, I'm hoping that as we get into this topic, that we can lay this out in such a way that the listeners can take this information and begin to do something with it. All right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now that we've gotten the Bible study thing, unless you had anything you wanted to add to that, Josh,
No,
I'll begin to move into.
I'm good on that. We'll talk about some other stuff later. I had a quirky comment come to my mind, but I don't know if I want to add it in right now or not.
Well, don't forget it, so that way we can talk about it later.
Well, you said the 12, and I was thinking the 13, but I don't think Mary Magdalene was with him yet.
Oh yeah. That's definitely something we're going to be getting into, especially when I start digging into that one. But
oh, absolutely. That there'll be a point in time where we talk about the 13 versus the 12.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So now that we've gotten into the importance of really just being able to understand this in order to be something, that you can use and to do something with it, let's go ahead and get into chakras. In order to work with chakras and to understand chakras, you have to understand kind of what we were talking about earlier, that the world in which we live is a very electrical place. But I believe that when you deal with the properties of electricity and things of that nature, you're actually dealing with spirit. You're actually dealing with the rudimentary substance that everything in this world, including you and I, are made of. And science is now proving that we are made out of what they call energy. But throughout all of history, there have been terms, when we deal with different things that we don't understand, we assign words to it in an effort to try to define things. So when you hear the term like spirit, there's energy that gets transcribed to it. There's vital force, there's the life force, there's the breath, but we're essentially talking about the same thing. We're talking about the substance that everything in the universe is made out of. Now, that substance is what we call energy, and what I like to call spirit. Okay. Now, when we deal with energy or spirit, let's look at the world. Josh and I talked earlier about, how we're dealing with electricity, dealing with electrical circuit, and dealing with how that the body is a very electrical mechanism. I mean, our heartbeat, all of the major systems in our body function off of an electrical current. But so does this world, this planet, this universe, all operates off of some of the exact same principles. And it's very fascinating when you begin to look at it, because when you think of an atom and what an atom looks like, we've seen it all in grade school. It's a ball, and it has that electrons make, and they spin around it, they orbit around it. But then when you look at the universe and the solar system, the Earth, I don't want to get into anything with flat Earth and all that other stuff, but but for the sake of this conversation, the Earth has a moon that orbits it,
right?
And we orbit the sun,
right?
We have our seasons, so you see this pattern happening all throughout, the universe.
I'm just going to say, as far as you made the comment about flat Earth, if you have any concerns or questions about flat Earth, please refer to Neil deGrasse Tyson. He will set you straight.
I am definitely not going to get into that can of worms.
Are you sure you don't want to do that as our next show?
Well, we're going to deal with some more energy stuff first, but maybe later on down the road. That'll be a fun topic. That'll be just like a freestyle topic. but when we deal with energy, a thing that I found when I was studying chakras is I got into electromagnetism. And the thing that's so fascinating about electromagnetism is that it explains how energy works. Tesla made the comment about how if you want to understand how the universe works, you have to look at electricity. You have to look at energy. And he was absolutely right. So when you think about, electromagnetism, and you think about how that all works, I'm going to use an example, right? So here's my old iPod. I still love this thing and listen to it to this day. I've got lots of my Slipknot songs on it, Josh. But let's look at this iPod, for example. This iPod is a device that needs electricity to function. Right now, I have it unplugged. So for the sake of this lesson, there's this device, then you have this cable, but it's not plugged into anything, so it won't do anything unless the battery's either charged, but right now the battery's dead. So I did that on purpose so I can click this button as many times as I want, but this iPod is not going to come on until I connect it to the power source. You follow me?
Right.
So when you deal with electromagnetism, check this out. Energy and electricity has to flow in a circuit in order for things to work. And all a circuit is like a pattern. It's like a channel by which the energy goes from one place to the next in order for the device to work, right? So with all electricity, you have to have what's called a conductive path. And usually that's a wire. It's just like this cable here. This cable allows for electricity via electron particles to flow from the wall outlet to this device. But if there was anything wrong with this cable, the electricity won't flow, or it'll flow improperly. Right. It could damage the device, it could damage the cable, it could even set my house on fire, just depending on how badly damaged this conductive path is. So keep that in mind. The conductive path is where the energy travels. The next thing is you have to have your power source, right? This iPod has a battery in it, but that battery needs to be charged. But in order to receive that charge, I have to plug the cable, my conductive element, into the power source. So the power source is the wall, where those charged electron particles, when I plug into the wall, the electricity will flow through this cable and hit what this device in electrical terms will be considered a load, or the actual component that will be utilizing the electricity that I just sent to it by connecting it to a power source. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, glad you can follow me. Now, an interesting dynamic that occurs when you plug any electrical device in, there's reasons why cables, have you ever wondered why cables have, the particular coating that they have? And if you ever took like a TV cable apart and saw how it had what looks like aluminum foil, and then there's another layer that looks like a braided wire and things of that nature.
It's protective coating. It's to protect the current and keep the current flowing the right way and keep it from getting out.
Exactly. It helps to channel that flow. Now, with the, let's talk about a TV cable. If you peel it back, they have what's called a shield, which is that aluminum foil, and then they have that twisted braid on it. Because when you send charged electron particles through a circuit, electromagnetism occurs. It begins to attract more electrons. And so what happens is that information can be sent out if it's not contained. It can go all over the place. That's why sometimes if you have a walkie-talkie, you may be able to pick up on someone else's frequency because, that information has bled from their communication channel onto another. Mm-hmm. That's why when you have buildings that have computer networks, they have to run a particular type of cable that's twisted a certain way to keep the information from going all over the place, because otherwise that data would not be secure. So so when you think about electricity and you think about the chakras, keep this analogy in mind, because we've talked about the cable in which the power flows, we've talked about the power source itself, and we talked about the device that utilizes the power. Okay? Now, another interesting thing when you deal with electricity and electromagnetism is the different properties such as speed. Those charged particles move at the speed of light. And it's just built within them to move at that rate. You follow what I'm saying? They just move that way.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have what's called wavelength. So that energy moves in waves. It's a constant flow that moves in waves. but the wavelength is the distance between one wave to the next. Trust me, this is all going to make sense in a minute. So I really want to get this electricity down because I think it'll just really tie the chakra talk in really well. But and the thing that makes up the wavelengths is what's called frequency, right? So frequency is basically how often those waves are occurring. They're going however long I have this device plugged in, that electrical wave is hitting that device nonstop. Right. Okay, and it's doing it at a certain speed, and it's doing it at a particular frequency.
Right.
Now, anytime that we talk about spirituality and spiritual principles, you have to deal with source, and you have to deal with where the power comes from. Okay, when we talk about energy from a spiritual term, people say all power comes from God. Power comes from, the source, or it comes from the quantum field. There's different labels, but at the end of the day, I like to use source because it makes the most sense to me. Right. All power comes from source. So with that power coming from source, and I stated earlier that everything is made from this source, from this energy, from this material that is invisible to the eye, just like electricity. No one has seen electricity, but we learned how to manipulate it. So if someone was to say spirit is not real, I can debate with them and say, well, the lights being turned on in your house is not a real phenomenon, right? And they may say, well, why do you say that? I can say, well, I can't see electricity. Can you see it? And they'll say, well, no, I can't see it, but I can see the effects of it. Well, it's the same thing with spirit. You can't see spirit, but you can see and receive the experiences of what spirit does if you learn how to work with and flow with spirit. So in dealing with electromagnetism and things of that nature, dealing with electricity, now I'm going to start talking more to the spiritual aspects of it so that you can see how spirit works just like an electrical circuit. For example, when we see color, we're not really looking at color. When we touch, like if I touch this iPod, it looks like I'm touching a physical device, but under the right microscope, you'll see that my fingers are doing nothing more than interacting with the energy that this thing is made out of. The energy that my body is made out of is touching the energy that this device is made out of. And because I'm vibrating at a different rate that this is energetically, it looks like in the 3D world, I'm touching this. But in fact, the energy that this thing is made of can go through my body and my body can go through it. And a good example of that is with a television or with a radio. If I turned on a radio, there's frequencies going throughout this entire planet, going throughout our bodies. We don't see them, but you have to be able to have what's called a receiver. And that's all a radio is a receiver that allows you to dial a frequency to be able to catch one station versus the next.
Right.
So we operate just like that. Our 5 physical senses don't actually operate as physical senses. They operate as translators of vibration. For example, color, and this is, you can go and look up, if you look up the electromagnetic spectrum and look up color, you'll find out that color has a frequency. Mm-hmm. It's not that I'm looking at the color red, I'm looking at Hertz number 565 or whatever the number is. But our eyes, the way that they're made, they translate light particles. And so we are able to translate the vibration of that color from the color spectrum.
Right.
When we hear sound, our ears are translating sound waves. So at an energetic level, our ears are doing nothing more than interpreting the vibration that's coming from the sound. You follow me?
Absolutely.
So
it's it's like a computer receiving Wi-Fi. It's getting this data sent through this wireless signal, and then it takes it, pulls it in through the system, takes it through the central processing unit, which would be the equivalent of our brain, breaks it down, processes it and then puts it into something that we can see and understand.
That's right. And with the electromagnetic circuit and everything that I just explained, the body itself has its own electromagnetic circuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's our spinal cord and our brain. And our spinal cord operates a lot like, I'll put my cable down, bring up another one. Our spinal cord operates a lot like this wire, where at the base of the spinal cord, it sends electrical signals up through our nerves, straight up to the back of our brain. And our brain is able to take that electrical current and send it through what's called our autonomic nervous system. That's why if you go to touch a hot stove, your hand can snap back really quickly without you even thinking of it. That's why in certain situations, you'll react to things out of instinct and you didn't have time to think. You know, you may have been getting ready to cross the street and a car was coming and you just had this notion to just move out of the way quickly. Your autonomic nervous system sensed danger and it sent electrical signals to your brain to warn you, okay, we need to send an adrenaline rush throughout the body so that we can move him out of the way quickly, otherwise he's going to get hit. And that is fascinating to me. When I started looking into how the body's electrical signal works, our heartbeat works off of an electrical current that's flowing through our spinal cord. It all works the exact same way. That's our electrical signal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're dealing with how that energy runs up and down our spinal cord through our brain and all throughout our body, remember what I said earlier about when energy or electricity goes through a cable, an electromagnetic field is created that attracts more electrons? Well, in our bodies, the electrical signal that's going up and down our spinal cord, reaching our brain and going throughout our body generates what science will call your biosphere. Or in the spiritual community, we call it our aura. It is the electromagnetic field that is generated around your body. And what that field does is it interprets different energy vibrations that are around you. For example, have you ever noticed you could walk into a room where someone may have just had an argument and the people may not even be there. But when you walk into the room, you're like, man, I just feel like this room's kind of heavy, like something's a little off in this room.
Right.
Well, that's because your aura is sensitive to things that are going on around you. It acts as a protective barrier, and it is a way in which the electromagnetic current that we're generating is protected, just like when I talked about the shielding on a cable that keeps the information from bleeding over. You follow what I'm saying so far?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Now that we've covered, the body's electrical component, the spinal cord and the brain, now we can finally start, talking about chakras and really getting into how the chakra works, because chakras are part of our internal spiritual electrical system. They're not physical, they're spiritual, but they are tied to our physical body.
Absolutely.
Now, Josh, in your opinion, what are chakras? What have you heard that chakras are?
I mean, the basic teaching usually that you hear is chakras are energy points in your body. It's points where energy is focused in your body. And, if you're you hear people talking about, oh, my chakras are out of alignment. Okay, well, if they're out of alignment, that means that energy is not flowing through your body properly. Or you'll hear people say something like a chakra is blocked. And so that means that energy is not able to flow through there. So to me, one of the basic ways to look at it is it's a series of points in your body where different energy operates at different frequencies and vibrations, and it flows through your system to operate your body and your spiritual body at its peak capacity when everything's working how it should. And when we think of chakras, those of us who have worked in the spiritual field and studied and been involved in a lot of these things and got into a lot of these teachings, you hear about the seven chakras, but in reality, there's a lot more than that in the body.
Oh yeah, there's a whole lot in the body, and there's so many different teachings on chakras because we found out that the word chakra is a Sanskrit word that means wheel, and you often hear spinning wheels of light. Uh, you'll hear discs and things of that nature, but essentially, what the chakras are, they are energy centers that are a part of our spirit, that are connected to the body, that help to regulate and flow and channel energy from spirit, or the spirit substance from the universe into our beings and back out. And that impacts the world. That's how the flow goes. And that energy comes from the power source. Remember, I mentioned the power source when I talked about my iPod being the wall outlet or a battery. Well, our power source is the universe. Our power source is source itself, And there's a quote that I really enjoy from The Science of Getting Rich. It's a book that one of the books that I read when I was beginning to really embrace my spiritual path, that really opened my eyes. And I really like how they explained it. They said that there is a formless substance that permeates all the intricacies of the universe. And it says that substance responds to man. That substance is intelligent, and it works with us in order to provide more life and the things that tend to life. It works to give us more life. If you look at the universe and you look at nature, it's about giving life. There are cycles that happen, but human beings are the only ones that don't get it. It's like when you look at grass grows. You don't have to tell it to grow. If the conditions are proper, that grass will grow, and you'll have to keep cutting it, but it'll keep growing as long as it has a root. And the universe works to continue to produce life. And that's the importance of being a spiritual person. It's like when you deal with spirituality, it's not just, in my opinion, it's not about being better than the next person. It's not about, oh, look at me, I'm such a pious individual that can do these great things, and I have made a name for myself. It's not about that at all. To me, spirituality is more about being able to flow in harmony with source, being able to understand and gain access to source, because source is where we get all of our knowledge. Source is where we get our life. Source is where we get information.
Absolutely.
The things that we don't know and the things that we don't see, and the things that we don't understand with our human eyes and with our human physical senses. The spirit, which is what we really are, is in tune to those things already.
Right.
But like a water hose, if you bend it, it stops the flow of the water. And with the chakras, if your chakras are not in alignment and not functioning properly, the life-giving force that's trying to come through you to give you more life, express itself, is kinked and it can't flow.
Right.
And so that's the importance of understanding chakras. That's the importance of understanding the point of having a spiritual life in the first place. Because I'll tell you from personal experience, I thought I was a pretty good person, living my life the best that I could, but when certain circumstances came that made no sense to me whatsoever, I had to rely on spirit to help me get through those things. And it didn't come from knowledge out of church. It didn't come from therapy or a counselor. It came from my connection to source and giving me the information that I needed and explaining that information in a way that I could personally receive it and understand it. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
As you begin to open up and understand what the chakras are and how to get them in alignment, you'll begin to see that those times in your life where you may run up against an obstacle, and when you learn about how this stuff works, you'll begin to resort automatically to spirit for your answers first. And that is the best thing to do, because in spirit, and I love the way shamanism deals with spirituality, because it talks about the web of life, how everything's interconnected, everything has a spirit, and you can have access to that. You know what I'm saying? So imagine having, and Josh, I know you understand this, but imagine when you have issues, being able to access the root of that issue and find out what it is and not be looking all around it. As I heard someone say in a video I was watching, we often tend to deal with circumstances by working with the circumstance rather than working with the root cause.
Right.
And so with learning about chakras and how to connect to source, we're learning about how to tap into the root cause of life.
Right.
And how to bring more life into our bodies and into our lives, and how to go about and affect the world around us. Okay. So to add to what you were saying, Josh, I wrote a couple other things down in dealing with the chakras as a definition of what chakras are. They are energy centers, but I really love this. In some studies, they're considered 7 maps of consciousness. And I thought that was interesting.
I totally get that too, because each one has a different. When you look at the 7 core chakras, or the 7 main chakras, each one of them ties into part of your survival or your transcendence, your ascension. And as you go through and you unlock and you work in these different chakras, because the root chakra is all about base survival stuff, and then as you work up through the chakras, you ascend up into higher and higher spiritual levels of knowledge until you get to the crown chakra, which connects you to the divine. When you get to the third eye, that opens up and allows you to start to see the spiritual realms. And then when you hit to the crown, that's the actual connection into it.
Yep. And we're dealing with consciousness. Oh, excuse me. And dealing, I love how it says 7 maps of consciousness, because for the longest time, consciousness was like such a magical word for me. I was like, what does consciousness really mean, though? It's like, it sounds so spiritual, but what in the world does consciousness mean? And all the word really means is awareness.
Yeah.
It's several levels of awareness. It's, when a person talks about having like a psychic gift or something like that, or being clairaudient or clairvoyant or all of those big words, right? All they're talking about is being aware of information that they can perceive. And so when you're dealing with consciousness, think of it in terms of awareness that you can perceive and understand, okay? And when you begin to work with the chakras and you understand how they flow, you'll also learn that they regulate the flow of energy that comes through us. So when I talk about the spinal cord, Josh, if you don't mind, hold up that photo out of the book, and if you like, you can go ahead and introduce that book.
Yeah, so the book that we're talking about right here is Chakras for Beginners. Oh, let me hold it up so you guys can actually see it. And it's by Ella Hughes. And I got the page marked here. Let me just find it. So.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully the audience can see that. I can see it pretty good. So, but notice in that diagram, the person is seated and the chakras are lined up right along the middle of that person. And so think of that in terms of the spinal cord. The chakras are like a layer. And oftentimes when you see a diagram of them, they float up the spinal cord. And the energy from source comes in.
Right here on the front cover, you can probably see, you can see it probably pretty good with the colors too.
Awesome. And that energy comes in through your root chakra and it flows upward. And it kind of makes a loop. It comes in from the base and it goes all the way up to the crown and it makes a loop. And if your chakras are in alignment, that energy flows the way that it should. You will be a more balanced person, but if your chakras are not in alignment, and we're going to get into that, some of the things you may notice is that energy flow is off. Something has disrupted the flow of energy. And where that disruption occurs is with your chakras, okay? Another thing that I like to say about the chakras is they are linked to your endocrine system in your physical body. You've heard people talk about the body-mind connection, right? And so I think that's fascinating because when we look at the things that we do without having to think about it. You know, it's like, I don't have to tell my heart to beat. I don't have to tell my kidneys to filter out whatever I put into my body. They just know what to do.
Right.
And so having that kind of a system in the body, we have the electrical current that's going by the spinal cord that's affecting the central nervous system, that's sending signals all throughout our body, that's telling all these different things to happen that we don't even know about. We're just kind of living life, but they're happening on their own. The mind actually can influence that process. And let me give you an example. Whenever if you were to just take a moment and think about something that really got you angry, really got you upset, you know, if I asked you to do that and I asked you to just close your eyes and focus on that, what you'll begin to notice is the minute you have that thought, your body will start to react. You may start to sweat. You may start to get angry. Your voice may raise, you know. Just having that thought about a situation that may have happened 20 years ago.
Right.
You know,
it's
a situation.
Your jaw, tensing the shoulders, you know.
Yeah, but a lot of people never wonder or think about the fact that a thought alone caused that to happen. Well, why did that happen? From a thought. Because a thought is a frequency that is energy as well, that is connected to our chakras, and it causes our chakras to open or close or to be imbalanced or out of alignment. So how you're thinking affects your chakras, which are tied in to your endocrine system. And what your endocrine system is basically are the chemical signatures in your body, your hormones, for example. You know, when you deal with your adrenal glands, they give you the fight or flight mechanism.
Right.
You know, and that comes from your adrenal glands, which is part of your endocrine system. Your pituitary gland deals with, you know, regulating melatonin and things of that nature so that we can sleep, so that the body has a biological clock. Well, isn't it amazing that, like what I just said, your thoughts can influence how that gland functions?
Absolutely.
And that's the importance of knowing where these chakras are, what they're tied to as far as the endocrine system, and how to begin to address them when you see different things in your life.
Actually, I have a section on this book right here I can read that will touch on that if you want, if you don't already have something down on that.
No, go for it. Go ahead and share that.
It talks about each of the chakras, starting with the root, which is at the very base of the tailbone.
Okay.
Now,
let me interrupt you for a second, Josh. If you like, I can kind of, as we go through each one, you can read from there, and then I can kind of share as well if we want to do it that way. That way we can kind of in tandem cover off on each.
Yeah, that works fine for me. So,
okay.
So with the root chakra, and what this is talking about is the organs or the body parts that are related to each chakra. So that shows how these chakras relate, what part of the bodies they work with and they regulate, which is what you was talking about right there. And so for the root chakra, it says the spine, the rectum, legs, arms, and the circulatory system. So that's what the root chakra works off of. And then the sacral, which is the next one up, is the reproductive organs, kidneys, the immune system, and the bowels. Solar plexus is the central nervous system, liver, pancreas, skin, and digestive tract. The heart chakra regulates the heart, thymus, lower lungs, immune system, and circulatory system. The throat chakra deals with the respiratory system, thyroid, vocal cords, and teeth. The third eye and the crown chakras deal with the eyes, sinuses, pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the nervous system, and the brain.
Perfect. And see, when you think about that, you were just reading the body-mind connection right there.
Yep.
You know, where you're dealing with how the spiritual aspect is connected to the physical aspect, and how they are so interconnected you really can't separate. I mean, they're literally tied together, and you can't like break that system apart. It's just like if I tried to take this iPod and I broke it apart, it's not going to work anymore.
Right.
But the components put together, it works just fine. In our body, when we are in balance and when we are understanding of the fact that this system is tied together, but this system can be damaged if we don't flow with the way that this system is supposed to work, or this system can benefit our lives when we learn how to flow with the interconnectivity. So understanding that the chakras are linked to your endocrine system will really help you to see how important your thinking is and how your thinking alone affects your body and how that can either bring more health to you or how it's destroying or damaging your physical body. I know personally, with dealing with high blood pressure and things of that nature, I was in very stressful environments for a very large part of my life. And I was always on go. I was always, just having to move fast and quickly and dealing with a lot of tense situations all the time. But I always felt at the end of the day like I had been in a fight already, because I had been taxing out my adrenaline, because my brain is having to run and rush and hurry, essentially fight or flight all day long, day in and day out. And my body is dispensing those chemicals to keep to keep me running in that cycle. But think about what that does to the body. Think about how that has affected my blood pressure, affected my heart, and other things until I started taking control of that process.
Right. It's
So
the same thing that happens with people that deal with anxiety issues. I mean, you're releasing those same chemicals that are keeping you in that fight or flight, and when your body stays at that state for long periods of time, it starts to break down. It can't handle that properly, and you start to develop, the anxiety issues that we see people, developing and stuff, and dealing with panic attacks and stuff along those lines, because their body's not has lost the ability to properly handle that because it's been stuck in that state.
that's right. And that's just like, if I think most houses, I believe that the power load on a wall outlet is what, 210 volts or something like that. I
It's
could be wrong.
the standard one is
120.
a 110, and the other is a 220.
Okay. Now imagine if, most of the devices in our houses are able to work with that kind of current. But imagine if I some kind of a way rigged my house to where 500 volts was coming out of my wall outlet, and I plug my TV set into it. What's going to happen? It's going to explode. It's going to do, set something on fire. So you have to be able to understand. You don't plug, something that's meant for 110 volts into something that's going to give you 500 volts. And you don't live a life that's full of stress and anxiety and things of that nature and think that your body is not going to pay a price for that.
Right.
Because the body was not made to function like that all the time, which is another important reason to understand the chakras and how they work and how they can give you feedback as to where you may be thinking or what may be going on in your life, and you can know where to make some adjustments. So in dealing with the chakras, let's go ahead and start with the root. You mentioned the root already. The root's attached to the adrenal glands. It's at the base of the spine. It's the perineum area, kind of where the privates are. That's where the root chakra is. And that chakra deals with survival. It deals with your most basic rudimentary needs, like, having a roof over your head, having clothing, having food, being able to protect yourself. And that center regulates your sense of feeling protected. And one of the things, Josh, that I like to look into when I'm dealing with chakras is the elements that are involved around the chakras. And I find it interesting that the element that deals with the root chakra is earth. And earth is dealing with being grounded. When you talk about the root chakra, keep in mind like a root of a plant being grounded into the earth. It's your base. It's your foundation. It is the thing that gives you your sense of home and your sense of stability. Just like when you put a plant in soil, that soil in that pot acts as the foundation for that plant.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the root chakra when you're sitting on the ground, that root chakra is in contact with the ground. And if
Right.
you look at your spine as like a tree trunk, the root chakra is where the roots would come out and go into the ground to connect with the soil and the planet, and get your connection from there. And we said that we was going to touch on some of the different energetic forces of the planet and stuff, and the magnetic forces, and how those affect us, and we bring that in through our root chakra.
That's right. When we deal with the root, well, when we deal with the first, what I like to call the lower chakras, dealing with the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, I call those the lower because they deal with more of our natural life. They deal with
Right.
more of our physical life.
Right.
Okay.
It's when we get into the upper, we start getting to dealing with more of the spiritual and the celestial.
Yeah. So in dealing with the root chakra, it's dealing with your most basic physical aspects. And thinking about your life, if you lived a life of poverty, or you saw stressful things happening all the time and you never really felt secure, you lived in a household or an environment where things were shaky all the time, unstable, you just saw chaos in, chaos out, and things of that nature, then it could keep you in a state of fear. It can keep you in a state of uncertainty. It can keep you running around looking for answers and trying to pull yourself together because you don't feel grounded. You don't feel at home. And that's a good indication that your root chakra has been conditioned to not be connected to source. You are now dealing with the elements of this natural world that are unstable. And so you
Right.
begin to see yourself as being part of that system, and it brings instability into your life. You know, it creates havoc, it creates chaos. And until you learn how to, that this is another important part of understanding spirituality is what helps you to correct these types. You know, it is the part of us that helps to deal with, okay, I may have lived a life of poverty and struggle and things of that nature, but in order to change that pattern and begin to be an entirely different person, spirituality is how you do. Working with spiritual laws is how you address those things. Because I can tell you all day long, Josh, you're not supposed to get angry. And then something to make you angry again. And then I can say, well, Josh, that's very bad of you. You should not be
Right.
getting angry. You may want to stop getting angry. It may be something you want badly. But until you get to the root and understand that you have to deal with your core, you have to deal with your root, your foundation, your base, in order to make that particular change. Until you know that, you'll be running around in circles.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and so the root chakra deals with things on that level of life. It deals with, you know, how you were raised by your mom and your father. What type of dynamic you saw there. What type of things you saw in your formative years. That is what your root chakra, till you take control of the process, that is kind of what overrides how your root chakra works. You have anything to add to that one, Josh?
No, I think you pretty much covered that pretty well. The only thing I would say to even add into that is, just so people understand and know what the Maslow's hierarchy of survival is and stuff. Um, that's what the root chakra deals with, is, the food, shelter, protection, the safety, and it goes on up to love and acceptance, which those come in at kind of a little higher levels, as far as that. But that's at the very top of the hierarchy of Maslow's needs.
And so when you think in terms of, we talked about the spiritual aspects of chakras and the circuit that we form, think about this. The universe is trying to send life to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the very first energy center it hits is your root, but your root is distorted. So you're not able to take and receive that life and receive that abundance, because that energy that's coming to change your life has to go through a kinked cable. it has to go through a distorted channel because your root chakra is not functioning properly. So that energy is not going to be able to hit and benefit your life. It's just going to kind of go and be channeled in a direction to give more life to the things that create more of what you've been accustomed to. That's where the law of attraction comes into play. And I know we're not talking about that particularly, but it all works together. So if your thoughts have been conditioned by your root, by how you've been raised, and that's how you're always thinking, when you're trying to make a change in your life, those thoughts that you have, if they have not been changed, you're going to empower yourself to keep living the same pattern.
Right.
And so you can't receive the energy to transform. You're going to receive the energy and create more chaos. So, so the root is one of the most important because there's the first place that the energy hits. It hits your root before it moves up the chain. Okay? Right. So let's move on to the sacral chakra. It is the second chakra. And each chakra has a color. And I didn't mention the colors. Each chakra has several different attributes. I encourage you to study them. What you'll find out is there are different symbols. They are symbolized as lotus flowers, and each lotus flower within the chakras have different petals. Like the root chakra has what they say is 4 petals, and the sacral has 2, and you can move on and on. I won't get into all of that tonight, but go and look into those different attributes. But the one that I want to focus on is color. The root chakra deals with the color red. Now think about this. What color is the stop sign?
Red.
It's red. When I want to get your attention, usually I'll put something in red. And as an artist, we have what's called color theory, but it's based off of these principles that we're talking about. But a lot of people don't understand that. So when you're dealing with the root, you're dealing with the color red, and so keep that in mind. The root chakra is associated with the color red. And I mentioned earlier that color is nothing more than a frequency that you can look up and see how that resonates and how that vibrates.
And just to touch on what you're going to go into, because I know the colors of the next couple of chakras as well. The colors that we're going to be tapping into in these first 3 are going to be red, orange, and yellow, which are all colors that are meant to grab attention. When you start talking about color theory, if you're going to put something out there to grab someone's attention right away, you're going to write it in those colors. You're going to present it in those colors. So that's going to draw the eye quickly and sharply to that immediately.
And in color theory, we've learned as artists that color affects your mood.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, think about everything that we said thus far. What is your mood made out of? It's made out of your thoughts.
Right.
So looking at that, it's affecting your chakras whether you know it or not. There are people in this world who understand these principles and they use them against humanity. They understand that I can color things a certain way, or I can send music at a certain vibration, and it will impact the culture in a particular way. And most of us who don't understand spirituality and don't understand chakras will just go out into the world and we're being affected by stuff and by stimuli that's meant to control us, and we don't even know why we're doing some of the stuff that we're doing, but there are people in the know who are just hitting our chakras with all kinds of things.
Absolutely. And going back into the talking about color theory is also with color theory, you have what is hot colors and cool colors. And and the way they trigger, like you was just saying, and then also each chakra has a certain frequency that it operates at. And certain frequencies will trigger those chakras in the different ways. So if you really, really want to get someone operating from their very base primal instincts, you want to trigger that root chakra instead of the higher chakras.
That's right. Now, a way that I think they do this a lot, Josh, is if I'm not a person that condemns folks per se, because I think that as a human, you have to live your life in what makes sense to you. I mean, I do have morals, but I don't make a life of judging people. But I have made a life of observation. So if you think about it, if you turn on the radio or listen to most of the music that's hitting the airways now, think of the content that's really being pushed out, the substance that's in the music. What are they talking about? What are they putting into our minds? We're hearing the beats and we're dancing along, but do we ever think about the lyrics? And do we think about how those lyrics, along with that music, is hitting us at a vibrational level and putting things within our consciousness? We may not be thinking about taking Molly, or we may not be thinking about going to the strip club and making it rain, or things of that nature. But we are being hit with that stuff nonstop. Do you think that's an accident?
No.
I don't think so.
And I mean, it's one of those things that it's like you mentioned. A lot of people don't necessarily think about the lyrics. They listen to the beat. Oh yeah, this is good. They'll sing along. But then when you really start breaking lyrics down, you know, just like you look at some of the songs, and some of the songs, even songs from the 60s and 70s and stuff, had some really dark lyrics. Great catchy tunes, some really dark lyrics.
Oh yeah.
And I know you and me, we've talked about music quite a bit and stuff, and we really dig deep into the lyrics when we're listening to songs. But some of them, some of the lyrics aren't so pleasing, I guess would be the way to put it, or uplifting, even though the beat may be really nice.
But see, at various levels, when dealing with chakras, that music vibration is hitting us one way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lyrics, as you said early on in this conversation, we were talking about the Bible and God, but everything was made out of words.
Yep.
So we create with our words as well.
Absolutely.
And when we are not creating with our words, we are listening to other people's words and creating what they want if we are not in control of ourselves. So all that to say, it's important to understand the information you're feeding yourself because it's hitting your root chakra. It is triggering your root chakra, or it's benefiting your root chakra and allowing that source energy to flow up. Into going into the next chakra is the sacral. So the sacral chakra deals with your emotions. It deals with your sexuality. It deals with creativity. It deals with your level of joy. And so the color that's associated with the sacral chakra is orange. And when you begin to deal with the sacral, if you have not had emotional stability in your life, if you have been abused or violated, if you have had your creativity stifled, things of that nature, your sacral chakra was affected. So that energy comes up through your root, and let's say that you feel okay at your fundamental level, your root is clear, but it gets to the next layer, it gets to that sacral chakra, and you have instability there. That energy is not able to flow upward, so it just kind of gets stuck there. So when you're dealing with the sacral chakra, you want to begin to think about your life in terms of, are you allowing yourself to experience joy? Are you allowing yourself to experience happiness? Are you okay with your sexuality and who you are as an individual? Or is that something that you struggle with? Those are areas that the sacral chakra tends to deal with, and the element that the sacral chakra deals with is water. And I love how when you deal with, oftentimes, people who are creative, like myself, one of the first things we like to do is go and sit by water.
Mm-hmm.
Because that water is so calming, it's soothing, and it allows you to receive, those creative and intuitive nudges, because it allows you to calm your emotional body down.
It helps you get into that flow state.
Exactly. And so the sacral chakra deals with things on that nature. Do you want to add anything to that, Josh, before we move on to the next one?
No, but one thing keeps coming to mind, and I think you and me talked about this before. The way the energies flow from chakra to chakra. I can't show it on air because I don't have permissions to show it. But in the TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I think you and me talked about this a while back. There's a point in the series where the main character Aang, who's supposed to be the Avatar, can't enter the Avatar state. And the reason is because his chakras are blocked. To enter the Avatar state, he has to hit into his crown chakra, to tie into that divine energy to be able to do so. And he
Yep.
goes and he sees this guru who starts talking to him about the chakras, and Aang just, he's kind of oblivious about the chakras and how they work, and so this guy's teaching him, and he takes him
I
to this
think
takes him to this area and shows him these 7 pools. And he says, the water swirls in these pools, just like the energy swirls in our chakras. And if there's something in there that's mucking up the pools and keeping them from flowing right, it stops the flow of energy through the chakras. And in the show, it shows there's like algae and seaweed and stuff in the pools that's blocking the flow. And so the guru grabs a hold of a stick and clears it, and you see the water flow into the next pool. And as he clears each one, the water starts flowing through each pool. So in order for us to really move from the root chakra into the sacral chakra, where we can get into our creative nature, we have to clear any blockages in the root chakra for that energy to flow properly into that. And as we talk about this, just remember that as we talk about moving from one chakra to the next, if you haven't dealt with the issues in that previous chakra, you're not going to be able to access. You may get energy, there was still water trickling through, but it was trickling instead of flowing. And so that's something to just take into mind as we're having this discussion. And you can go find this clip on YouTube. If you're on the Discord channel, I'll link it up on the Discord under the Breaking Reality tabs. You guys can actually, it might already be up there. I post that stuff all the time. It's one of my favorite little sections from that show. But
that show is amazing.
It absolutely is. It teaches a lot of really good core spiritual beliefs through it. And for being a kid's show, it really touches on a lot of things. But that just keeps coming to mind, that episode where he's talking about this. And if you watch the episode, don't worry, you don't have to have the banana juice and onion juice drink to open up your chakras.
Yeah. See, we didn't talk about anything like that.
No banana, but no banana juice.
We'll deal with juice concoctions later on.
Yes, so. Yes, absolutely.
But anyway, moving on from the sacral chakra, it feels like it's something I'm forgetting. Oh, where the sacral chakra is located is near your reproductive organs. It's like for men, it's where your testicles are, and for ladies, it's kind of where your ovaries and things of that nature are located. It's
kind of right over the womb area for a woman.
Yeah, it's located near the reproductive organs, and it governs that area. I know Josh did a very good explanation of those areas, so I encourage you to either find that book or go back through the video to see that information, because for sake of time, I won't go too deep, but go back and reference what all that's connected to and how it functions. Okay?
I mean, I'll hold this up. The one thing I've noticed about the cover of this book is the colors of the chakras are all wrong. It's got a horrible glare coming off of it. I'm trying to fix that. But if you notice, the colors are just all off.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but yeah, I totally see that.
Yeah.
So look at the book for information, but don't go off the colors on the cover.
Yeah. Actually, if you want to know the colors and the order, look at the little logo for the show. You'll see it around. I literally have the chakras built into the logo. That was part of the design. So you see the color scheme going through the logo.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that's true. So the next chakra is the solar plexus chakra. Now, the solar plexus chakra is located, it's near your physical solar plexus, and it governs your confidence, your willpower, feeling like you're in control. And so the solar plexus chakra deals with the color yellow. Have you noticed that they tell a lot of people who deal with depression to go outside and get in the sunlight? Because the color yellow resonates with that particular chakra, which stimulates your willpower. It stimulates you being able to take leadership of your life and to stand as an individual who's confident, who's strong, who's able to make strong decisions and to go out and make things happen. And so think about how if you have not had a confident life, or you've been unable to prove to yourself who you are and prove that you can do the things that you like to do, or been able to set goals and achieve them. If you condition yourself to a lot of not being able to do those things, then your solar plexus chakra is not functioning properly, because that is the one where, when it's in alignment, you feel strong, you feel empowered, you feel that you're able to go out and make some decisions and do the things that you need to do out of sheer willpower alone. And
Yeah,
so,
you have that confidence and that inner confidence.
yes, and thinking again, when the universe tries to send that energy that way, and it's wanting to work with you and help you to be stronger, it can't do that if that chakra is out of alignment. That energy is going to hit and not be able to flow properly. So you're going to have more of the lack of confidence and things of that nature.
I want to touch on what you just said right there real quick too, because you said if that's out of alignment, that energy is not going to be able to flow. So when you're in the solar plexus, if your root and your chakra are open and energy can flow through those, but it gets to the solar plexus, what's going to happen is that energy is going to become like a stagnant pool of water. It's not going to be able to continue flowing up the chain, so it's going to stagnate and it's going to become poisonous. Stagnant water is poisonous. You can't drink stagnant water. It will make you sick. And when you get that stagnation, that's what happens in that chakra, because like we talked about, the chakras are a spinning wheel of energy. It's a vortex, and it's got to continue to move, and if it can't continue to move, then there's a problem, and you're not going to be able to stand in the power of that chakra.
Yeah. And particularly when you deal with energies, we deal with the masculine and feminine side of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And think about leaders that you know without naming any names. Leaders that you have seen recently, who some people think they're strong and think they're powerful and decisive, when in fact they're not. They have a distorted view of masculine energy, and that energy is flowing to them, but look at how it's being expressed.
You can
Through
name names, I
bullying.
don't care.
Well, I stay away from that stuff, but I'll name attributes. When you see bullies, when you see people
Right.
who don't consider others, and they are just all about getting their way and they're being forceful. That's a solar plexus chakra that is out of alignment and out of balance and not functioning properly.
Mm-hmm.
Because a person who's in alignment, they are strong, but they are what I call meek. They are strength that is reserved. They are able to go out and do amazing things, but they are able to keep themselves in balance. In bullies, they're looking for how they can help humanity, and they bring strength to a situation because they are confident in who they are, and they're able to do what they do confidently, not from a place of bragging or trying to make up for something that they actually don't. So we've all seen that, but that's a good example of a solar plexus chakra that's out of alignment.
Now you said something there that I do want to touch on before we go further. This is going to be
Okay.
something that we're going to bring up down the line. It's not something we're necessarily going to dive into right now. But you mentioned the male and female energies, the masculine and the feminine energies that reside in all of us. That plays a critical part in the chakra system and what is known as Kundalini and the
Right.
Kundalini energies. And those are very tied into the chakra system, and I know we're going to cover this sooner or later, one way or another. One of us is going to bring this up because it's very critical to the way the chakra system works when it's fully open and activated. The Kundalini energies activate. And
It's oh, go ahead.
no, I want to hear what you got to say. Uh,
See, I didn't want to dive too deep into that because I felt that you and I could definitely take that and run with it. But for the sake of this conversation, where we are Kundalini, think of it in terms of a battery, and notice how on a battery you'll have a positive and a negative side. So masculine and feminine energy kind of works that way. They work together, but they are two spectrums of the same thing. They have different polarities, for
I
lack of
have
a better
something that
word.
shows Kundalini in a way. It's in one of the books, but the twin snakes that rise up through the chakras. This is a representation of Kundalini energy, and one snake is the masculine and one snake is the feminine, and they mirror each other. So this is something to that we're going to come back and touch on definitely in more depth. But it just when you said that, it just brought up, it triggered the Kundalini energy thought and the twin snakes, and that's something that we definitely need to touch on.
Yeah.
And it's not literal snakes. It talks about it because of the way that the energies move is like a withering, and they intertwine, twisting up through the chakras, and that can only happen once all of your chakras are open properly.
And to that point, Josh, if I was to ask you to Google an image of wavelength, you'll be interested to find out what that looks like. You
Oh
probably
yeah.
already know.
It looks exactly like the Kundalini energies when you see the two waves of the wavelengths going over each other as you're dialing them in, and
Right.
that's exactly a representation of what you're seeing. It's an energetic representation, and they used in different traditions and stuff. They use snakes as a representation of that.
It's just like what we said earlier about Jesus teaching in parables. When we study ancient knowledge, a lot of things are represented by everyday things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, snakes are often regarded in one aspect of belief that they're evil, that they represent satanic stuff and things of that nature. When in fact, in a lot of ancient societies, snakes represented a bridge between physical knowledge and higher knowledge.
Right.
And so
And a lot of times snakes were representations of wisdom as well.
that's right. Just like dragons in Chinese culture,
Yeah.
they're very wise animals, but they're considered a sea serpent.
Right.
Still a snake, but we'll definitely get into Kundalini later, and I think once we finish the chakra topic, that people will be able to grasp Kundalini a little bit more because they'll understand the purpose of it and how it works.
Right.
Especially now that they'll know what the chakras are and kind of how to balance them in a sense. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up and showed that illustration because hopefully someone will take that and go look that up.
Absolutely.
um, yeah. So let's see. We left off with solar plexus.
Yep.
Okay, the next chakra is the heart. And before I get into that, earlier I mentioned that the first three I consider the lower chakras because they deal with the lower aspects of who we are as an individual. When you deal with the heart chakra, I like to look at the heart chakra as the gatekeeper between moving from a natural state into a more spiritual way of living.
Absolutely.
It's like you got to go through and elevate the natural level first, and the heart is the door that swings open and goes and allows access to the upper.
Right.
Now, think about how if a person has not addressed the lower nature and they try to operate in some type of spiritual power, what's going to happen?
Well,
All kind.
yeah, there's going to be all kinds of issues because the way that I see it is the lower three operate with the physical body. All of them have things that are tied into the physical body, but the lower three help really function the aspects of the physical body. And like you said, as you move into the heart chakra, that's the gateway that's opening things up and allowing things to move into the spiritual body.
That's right.
And then different, you hear things like the Ka body or the spirit body, and where you start to move into that presence, into that power. And the heart really is, as you said, the gateway to it. They're all critical to getting to that point, but that's kind of a transition into it. And as we go through the next couple, you'll see why it's considered a gateway.
Yeah. So the heart deals with love. It deals with not only receiving love, but giving love.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking earlier about Jesus, but we can talk about any of the sages, any of the other avatars that dealt with real spirituality, they always come back to love and how love is important.
Right.
And in the world, we think, some of us think that love is just, you know, puppy love type of stuff or romantic kind of love, but that's not what love is at all. You know, love, that's an aspect of an expression of love.
Right.
But love is really dealing with how you are able to regard another person above yourself, how you are able to have empathy, how you are able to look at a person who's hurting and connect to them and be able to give of yourself in order to restore them and to see what they need. It's about giving to others. It's about sharing. It's about those types of aspects. And so it's not a selfish thing at all.
Right.
So that is why I believe Jesus talked more about love than anything else, because you can't operate from a spiritual nature
absolutely.
without love.
Jesus's whole ministry was about love. I mean, his whole ministry was about love. There was nothing else that he taught other than love. And there's I'll dig it up. There's a meme I've got, and I know it's a quote, and I can't remember exactly who the quote is from on it. But it says that religious people talk about theology and doctrine and man-made laws that they tie into things, where the mystics, it's talking about the language of them. The language of the religious is theology and doctrine, and the language of the mystics is love.
That's right.
And that's all they teach. I mean, and when you start looking at some of the mystics, you know, look at Jesus, look at some of the other different mystics. You can look at Gandhi as a mystic. Gandhi only spoke of love. Mother Teresa. Yeah, mm-hmm. We're on the same page. Mother Teresa only spoke of love.
But look at the things that woman did, and you would look at her through natural eyes and think she was poor, think she was just a lowly nun, you know, who just sacrificed her physical life to live a meager existence. But look at what all that woman did.
One of the viewers just said Bob Marley.
Exactly, another person.
Exactly.
See, these kind of people understood that spirituality is more important than anything.
Right.
And love is the gateway that opens you up to accessing more aspects of a spiritual nature. You know, people talk about miracles and wanting to be able to do this and do that. Well, think about if a person who's a gangbanger was able to work miracles, what they would do with that kind of power.
Right.
They wouldn't heal the world. They wouldn't bring, you know, good to the world. They would destroy the world. So spiritual power is entrusted in the hands of those who walk in love, who understand the importance of love. And that is what gives you access to those types of things. It's not all the books that you read, you know. You're going to say something?
Well, Bridget just said, did you all mention Gandhi? Which we did.
Oh, yeah. I think you mentioned Gandhi first.
Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned Jesus and then Gandhi.
Then Gandhi. But one of the things that I want to say is when you start talking about love, and we've talked about frequency and vibrations a lot during this, love is, on the emotional spectrum, love is the highest frequency that we as humans can experience and understand and know.
That's right.
So energetically, it is one of the higher energetic feelings that we can embrace and operate from. And
exactly.
and I think that's why it truly is the language of the mystics, because they try to operate at that high frequency at all times. And so love was where everything came from. And if you
Yeah,
really want to go back to it, love is the source of all creation.
it is.
You know,
It really is.
you think about, when a child is made, it's made through the act of love. A life is brought in through love. When you go and you really want to get back to the core of all creation, if you want to call it God, the source, Allah, whatever name you want to credit to it, everything was done out of love when the creation process was being done.
That's right. And I really like when you deal with Jesus as an example, in particular from my background. I love how oftentimes Christians would talk about the works that Jesus did and the power that he showed. And oftentimes, whenever you saw him work a miracle, he would ask the person, do you have the faith to receive this? Or, do you believe I can do this?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just go and heal people. They had to believe that he could before they could receive that.
Right.
And that term was often called faith. Well, the Bible says that faith works by love. So that means that in order for you to even really be able to have any kind of power to believe and have that kind of a spiritual walk, you have to have love as a basis. Because otherwise,
exactly,
it'll be a perversion. Yeah.
And like we said, you look at Jesus's ministry, and it was all done in love. Even when he went into the temple and was flipping the tables and beating the crap out of the money changers, it was done out of love, because it was for a love of the sacredness and the divinity that place held, and they were perverting it with their greed.
I wish that he would come through today and do that. I mean, COVID has kind of gotten rid of a lot of that, but I don't want to get myself in any trouble. But in a lot of houses of worship, it's the same kind of thing going on, and Jesus is not there.
You can see it. You can see it. I won't name names, but there's you can see it. There's these big, and I'm not condemning these things, but some of these big mega churches, and you see them just asking for money left and right, left and right, left and right.
Yeah, Jesus needs to go through there and flip some tables.
Where's that money going? It's not going to take care of the people that Jesus said to take care of. It's not going to the poor. It's not going to the needy. It's not going to the widowed. It's not going to the orphans. It's not going to those people that are in need, which is who Jesus said that we're supposed to take care of.
Out of love.
Out of
because
love.
Because love would compel you to do that with the money, right, rather than go and build yourself an even bigger house.
Exactly. And Jesus even says, if you have great means, at least I think he said this. I could be mistaking this from another teacher because I read so much. But instead of building higher walls, build a bigger table. It's the same thing. Bring more people to your table to be able to sit and dine with you. Bring more people to be able to share in what you have, rather than to build up walls to keep them out and to keep your greed, to keep your wealth, to hoard it. And that's really, honestly, the evils of capitalism, if we want to break down into it, because it stresses gain wealth, gain wealth, gain wealth, gain wealth, get money, gain wealth, gain wealth. But it doesn't talk about sharing that with others. It doesn't talk about using that wealth that you've gotten to help others. And that's where we've really lost it. When you go back and you look at tribal cultures, they took care of each other. There was no one that ever went without in a tribe. When a lot of times they ate together, they would hunt together, they would grow, they functioned as one giant family unit. And
that was in tune with the earth too, because they loved the earth.
Exactly.
And every creature.
And they had great respect for the earth. They didn't take any more than what they needed from it. And when they did take something from it, they made use of all of it. When they would hunt, they would use every part of the animal. When they would harvest a plant, they would only take what parts of the plant they needed, and then they would replenish the plant. Let's see. Cannon just said that's why religion needs structure to attract wealth because there's an absence of love.
That's right. That is a very good point.
Yeah.
And that is why I believe spiritual abuse takes place, is because they're not operating out of love. And not to hamper down on churches, but I mean, you can see this everywhere. Anytime you see a situation where love is not present, then you can understand why the conditions are not really changing, because
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing there to bring life to the situation. It's only bringing dark energy and things of that nature, and it's not fixing anything.
I mean, we usually don't dive into this aspect on the show, but I mean, look at politics. There's a lack of love in what our politicians do for the people of this country. And look at why we are in the state that we are today, because they're not operating from a state of love. They're not operating from a position of love. At least not love for their fellow human beings and their fellow man, their fellow countrymen. They're operating out of a desire for, honestly, if I'm going to, just call it how it is, greed and wealth and power.
That's right.
And,
And so you know that their heart chakra is closed.
yeah. Now there may be a few up there who that are working on our behalf, but to be honest, I the majority of it is not coming that way, or this country and this world would not be in the position that it's in right now.
That's why you know if there was 20 Mother Teresas, think about the impact that could have happened. She made a large impact by herself,
Oh,
but think if there
absolutely.
were 20 of her, you know. And so hopefully, once we are done with this chakra talk, people will get inspired to understand love and the importance of it, along with the other chakras that we talked about, and how as you balance each one, how that you're able to pull from source, and it will empower you even more, because now we've gotten into the doorway, getting into the more spiritual aspect of things. That's when you really are interconnected in that one with everything. you
Absolutely.
know so love is the gateway. It is the heart chakra, and the color for the heart chakra is green, which I've always thought was interesting. Because when you look at nature, the majority of the trees, the foliage is green. The majority of the foliage on most plants is green. We see it everywhere, and I don't think that was a mistake, that in creation that color surrounds us, because it is in an effort trying to
It,
keep our hearts in alignment.
well, it's the color of life when you really look at it. When you think of what color represents life, a lot of people think of green because
Yeah.
of the plants, of the earth, of everything that comes from that. Um, we are about to hit the 2 hour mark, but I have no problems continuing going on if you'd like to continue and at least get through talking about all the chakras.
Yes, we only have, let's see, we have three more. We can go ahead and hit those three real quick, and we
Take
can.
your time with it. Don't rush through them. I just wanted to let you know where we was at time wise.
Okay, completely lost track of time. Time flew by tonight.
It's one of those things.
Yeah. Okay, so in dealing with the heart, let's move on to the next one, which would be the throat chakra. Now, the throat chakra is located. Oh, the I keep forgetting to get into the places and colors and all, but so the heart chakra is located near the physical heart,
Right.
and the color is green. So moving up the chain, we deal with the throat.
Before you said that, Bridget did just say, but the color of money is also green.
That's a very good point. I think somebody did that to twist things.
A manipulation by using that color to represent life,
Yeah,
tying money
because
into life.
and when you look at it from a biblical standpoint, the Bible says it doesn't say money is evil. It
No.
says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yep.
So to me, what that means is you are so consumed with getting money that you don't love anything or anyone else, and that will permit you to do whatever it takes to get what you're going at.
Right. It's basically saying greed is the root of all evil. Not that money
Yeah.
is, but it's greed.
And it is interesting that Bridget pointed out that money is colored green. It's not a different color.
Right.
I never thought about that.
At
We're
least
gonna have
money in this country. Money in other countries are different. It's different colors and stuff. But at least money in this country is green.
yeah. So definitely gonna look into that one. Um, but going back to the throat chakra is near the throat, and it is associated with the thyroid gland. When we deal with the body's connection, and from a spiritual standpoint, it deals with how you're able to express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, dealing with me, I grew up a lot where I was told to shut up all the time. I was a very smart kid, very inquisitive. So I would ask lots of questions, and the default response was shut up or stop talking. Or, I'd be in class and I'd raise my hand and it wouldn't get acknowledged. So things of that nature close off your ability to express yourself. So you will be less inclined to communicate. You'll be less inclined to feel free to communicate your truth, how you see things, in your position in this world when your throat chakra is closed. And your throat chakra is also linked. It's another one that's linked to your creativity and how you're able to creatively express yourself.
Right.
And
it's related to creation because of what we said earlier. We create with our words.
Yep.
And so and what we speak is what we speak into creation. And that's something I do want to dive into just a little bit, and I'm more than willing to take the time if you are tonight.
I am. Let's go.
When you look at the way we talk and the way we speak, you hear people saying, it's important the words that we say and how we say them. And especially when we start dealing with the way we speak to ourselves. A lot of people put themselves down constantly. Oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not pretty enough. I'm too this, I'm too that, whatever it is, and people will talk to themselves in such a negative way. And that's stuff that will shut down that chakra, that will shut down that ability. And it will even move on because you start to get to a self-loathing and a self-hatred because you don't feel that you're good enough, and that starts to close down the heart chakra. And it's a chain reaction that will continue on down with that. And so the way that we speak, not only to others, but to ourselves, is very critical, because what we speak, we put into creation. And one of the things that I have learned through just studies and stuff, when you go back and you look at the history of what would be called spell casting, or putting a spell out there, it was originally, if you said I am, and whatever came after that was considered a spell.
That's right.
So if you said I am ugly, you're casting a spell on yourself saying I'm ugly. But if you said I am beautiful, or I am loved, or I am strong, or I am powerful, or I am accepted, you're casting spells on yourself that puts you in that positive nature.
That's right. And see, I'm really glad you brought that up, because as you were talking, I thought about 2 or 3 different biblical references that really got my attention years ago. It said in one scripture says the power of life and death is in the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And the person will eat the fruit of their tongue. Another one says, it makes a comparison to how big a ship is, but the rudder is so small. But that small rudder can control the direction that the ship goes. And that was also a reference to how the importance of what we say and what our words are, how they impact and affect and control and steer the ship of our lives. And especially when you consider, when we started out, you mentioned that God spoke everything into existence. Well, think in terms of what we've been saying about chakras and how we are working with source. We are working with creative energy from the universe to create our lives. And when we are speaking negatively to ourselves internally, eventually that's going to come out of our mouths. And when it comes out of our mouths, it is going to affect our world. One last thing from the biblical aspect, Jesus said one time, in a debate. It's not what goes into a man that defiles a man. It's what comes out of the man. And he was talking about how what comes out of the person is preceded by their thinking. And what they think affects what they say. And that is what you put out into the universe to create in your world and in your life. So when your throat chakra is out of alignment, you are using that creative ability against yourself by not creating what you want, and you are reproducing more of what you've had in your life that you may not want to state.
Help me with a scripture here real quick, Melvin. You probably know where it is better than I do. Oh, here it is. I got it. John chapter 1. I thought it was John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yep.
That's not talking about the Bible as the Word.
That's right.
It's talking about the words we speak. It's talking about creation. It's talking about, a lot of people hear it and think this is the Word. It is, but yet that scripture means so much more.
Yep. You can find this principle in any other belief system. I mean, when you think about from an aspect of how we have a memory, for example, when we remember something, I love the English language and I tear words apart all the time. So when you think about remember, the prefix is re, it means to do again. So when you are remembering something, you are reconstructing and rebuilding it in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, when you're doing that, the way in which you assemble that picture in your mind is based off of words that you've heard. It's based off of things you've even said to yourself. Like if you say, I'm stupid. When you make that comment, that word stupid triggers a mental image that's stored in your subconscious. And it sends those signals. It starts in the spirit, but ends up in the natural. So it's a spiritual thing at the level of thought, but in the natural, it comes up into your biochemistry. And you are releasing hormones and things that resonate with what you just said.
Absolutely.
And you are reprogramming your cells to keep making you look the way that you have just defined yourself with your words.
If you go to any kind of self-help or life coach or anything like that to try to get help to better yourself, one of the first things they are going to tell you is to change the way you talk to yourself.
Right.
That is one of the first things they will tell you. If you want to work on achieving a goal, they're going to tell you to talk to yourself in a way that makes that goal achievable.
And the reason why they focus on that, and this is a whole nother show, but the reason why they focus on that is because we've discovered, you've heard the term suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've learned is that our subconscious is highly susceptible. This is a tongue twister. The subconscious mind is highly influenced and susceptible to what we hear.
Right.
That is why the commercial industry exists.
Right.
Because they know when we hear something long enough, it's going to get inside of us. Once it gets inside of us, it's going to be on autopilot, and it's going to influence what we do, how we think, what we say, what we bring into our lives. And so what you say to yourself, you are storing within your own subconscious. And that is what is the life spring that's giving and creating more life and flowing with source to change your life. So it's part of that system to where, when you are not monitoring what you're hearing and not monitoring what you're saying to yourself and what you're allowing other people to say to you, you are allowing all of that stuff to get sown into your good ground. And you are reaping the result of what's stored there.
Right. And that all starts with it activates in that throat chakra like we was talking about. That's where you change that, is by operating in power and standing in power inside that throat chakra.
Yeah, but then you have a spiritual teacher, going back to Jesus again. I guess tonight we're using a lot of those examples, but going back to him, he talked about how that if you believe that what you said will come to pass, you'll have what you say.
Yeah.
And he used an analogy. He actually did a physical lesson where he cursed a fig tree just to prove that point. Him and his disciples were going to a town, and he literally looked at a tree and spoke to it and said, "No man eat fruit of you from this day forward." And then he walked off. And the Bible said the disciples heard him say that. They came back the next day, and that tree had been uprooted and had died, completely fallen over. And they asked him, how did that happen? And he used that as an object lesson to explain the power and importance of the words that we say that we believe.
Yep. And it's because he spoke those words with such a true conviction of belief.
That's right. And when we learn how to operate with our chakras, and we begin to fix our internal dialogue and monitor what we allow others to say and what we receive through our ears, we can then believe that those things that we say are going to happen, and we're going to make them happen. Right. Because we will flow with source and know how to do those things. But again, until you fix the system, that energy is never going to get there. That right. Kundalini is never going to rise to that point and benefit that. So that's vitally important that you're able to creatively express yourself, speak your truth, and have your throat chakra opened and functioning properly. So moving on to the next one, the third eye chakra it governs the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is considered the master gland because it controls so many chemical systems in our physical body. But from a spiritual aspect of things, it deals with your intuition. It deals with being able to have insight, being able to have vision. From a spiritual aspect, being able to connect to those types of, when we talk about supernatural abilities, the third eye is what gives you insight and access to those types of things.
And that also ties into your pineal gland as well.
Yeah, the third eye and the crown definitely function with the pineal gland. And we'll get to that when we cover off on the crown, but the third eye, a lot of people, when they talk about spirituality, the first thing they want to do is open their third eye. Like, I really want my third eye to be open so that I can see and understand, but they never address the other chakras.
Right. They think that they can shortcut, open the third eye, everything's going to come into alignment, they're going to see everything, they're going to gain all this knowledge, they're going to gain all this wisdom. But like you said, until you clear that pathway for that energy to flow, wherever it's blocked at, if you haven't addressed that, you're not going to get that third eye. You may get little glimpses of it here and there, because like I said, even in the analogy that they used in Avatar, The Last Airbender, the water was trickling through. It wasn't like it was cut totally completely off, but it wasn't flowing the way it should. Yeah.
And when you deal with chakras, there are states that they're in. They're either active, where they are functioning properly. They're overactive, where they could be getting hit too much, and you need to bring some balance. And they can be balanced to where the chakras flowing properly, the energy's flowing properly, and you'll be in a more harmonious state. That's how you know when your chakras have been in alignment, because you will operate from a more fluid state. You'll feel connected. You'll feel at one with things. You'll feel very interconnected, and you'll kind of lose yourself in the broad spectrum, in a sense where, I know we've all had moments where it's like, wow, I feel so connected to everything. You lose track of time, you lose track of where you are, you just feel united with everything, with the all. And
you mean like when you and me start talking?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so when that pineal gland is functioning properly, you'll get access to spiritual knowledge. You'll get, when people talk about getting those aha moments or getting divinely inspired. Now, as Josh was alluding to, there'll be times you get trickle effects, and that happens with all the chakras. It's no different than like trying to water your lawn. And like I was trying to do the other day, I was going to water my lawn, and my hose is on this spindle, and I didn't realize that one little part close to the very edge of the spindle, the hose was kinked. I was like, man, I have this whole thing on coil. Why is the water not coming out? The water was turned all the way on, but no water was coming out of the faucet because I had that one little kink in the system. And so, there are times where that kink may not be there, but there's a little bit of a kink further up the line. And so you'll notice that the water pressure may be really strong, but no water's coming out, just little trickles. And the chakras operate the same way. What you want is for them all to be in alignment, all to flow properly so that you have a good flow of energy.
Right.
And not where you have kinks and things going all over.
Right.
And so I found that when my third eye got opened, that information to me that I was looking for answers to just started coming. It's like I'd be sitting and I have inspired thoughts, and then I knew that they weren't mine. I'd be like, I know I didn't think of this, and I'd go and look it up, or I'd find something out, and that's because I've been working on balancing all of my shit. And so with that being said, as you begin to elevate, you begin to get glimpses into a more spiritual path, and things start to reveal themselves to you. You begin to see things, and you can walk in things, and you begin to see the how-tos rather than, the constant circle of questions and trying to find people and just going through the frustrations of not having answers to things. Once that third eye opens up, you'll begin to get inspired, and you'll begin to get glimpses of things and knowledge. It'll come to you in dreams and visions. You may even have an astral projection experience where you are able to go to a place and get information. So having that third eye open is cool and it's incredible, but you gotta address all the other chakras to really benefit from what that chakra is for, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And the last of the seven is the crown chakra, and it again is it works with the pineal gland just like the third eye. The crown chakra, when it's opened, they talk about it's like 1,000-petaled lotus. How it's completely opened up. It's your connection to the divine, your connection to source. You feel at one. You are considered enlightened at that. If the energy is able to rise through all of your chakras, if you want to talk about Kundalini, the way Kundalini works is that serpent energy pierces through all of the chakras, and once it gets through the crown, you're considered an enlightened individual. That's why when you look at images of saints or the old pictures of Jesus or Buddha or any of those guys, they have a halo around them, or they have what looks like a rainbow or something that's glowing. That symbolizes an open crown chakra. It symbolizes the fact that they are in alignment, they are in balance, they are connected to source, and that energy is radiating from them because they are an enlightened individual. They are an enlightened being. And they're operating from a more spiritual plane more consistently than a natural.
Right, and that's not something that just happens now and then. They operate constantly from that position. Once they have everything open and unlocked, that is a state that they reside in.
And I believe that's the goal for any of us who, are on the spiritual path, is to make that our daily habit. Not that you lose touch with humanity. I think you become more involved with humanity.
Oh yeah.
When you become a more spiritual person. You're able to see past, the person or that made you angry. You're able to see past that and look at, well, maybe they were dealing with something. Or I know traffic is a big challenge for me. There are times that I get really upset in traffic, but my goal is to look at it and go, you know what? I'll just be a mature person and be a defensive driver, and maybe that person's dealing with something that I don't understand, rather than just immediately getting worked up over somebody cutting me off or something like that. Right. You were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, earlier we talked about some of the mystics and stuff. We talked, about Jesus, and then we mentioned Gandhi and Mother Teresa and stuff. They operated from a position with that crown chakra open. Because they operated in a position of true enlightenment and true love. They didn't stop at that heart chakra and just operate from there. They continued on up. And you was mentioning that you don't believe that it brings you a disconnect from humanity. It brings you a more direct connection. If you look at them, look at the works they done. They were doing great works on behalf of humanity because they had opened themselves up to this point, and they were doing these works because they wanted to help raise humanity up and bring them out of functioning purely in those lower chakras, functioning
Yeah.
purely in that primal instincts of survival and reproduction, and the basic things that happen in those three lower chakras. They wanted to bring them up, and it's kind of interesting. Once you hit that heart chakra and you open up that path of love, opening up those next few chakras gets really easy.
Oh, yeah. I think the lower chakras are the hardest
Oh,
because,
I agree with that.
yeah, they are the ones that we've been conditioned to the most, is living in this physical world,
Mm-hmm.
all with these physical rules that have been set by other people and systems. And we just get all of our conditioning from that. And a lot of humanity never even comes into this knowledge. So think of a life where a person is born and a person dies, and they never tapped into who they actually were. They were just kind of born into this system of being, went along with life, whatever that looked like, and then they died.
Right.
They didn't make an impact. They didn't change themselves. They didn't change their circumstances. They never even found out who they truly were because they just lived the life that they were given, you
Right.
know, and they never went beyond that. I think that is the worst way to die, is to never have lived. And when I say that, I'm talking about from the standpoint of never knowing who you truly are as a spiritual being, never knowing what you are here to do, what your purpose is, what you
Right.
can operate in, and how you can help humanity above and beyond just waking up, going to a job, getting a paycheck, eating your dinner, watching television, and going to sleep and rinse and repeat. You know, so I think that once you embrace being a spirit and you begin to understand how the spirit world works and how to connect and how to operate with your chakras, that you can not only benefit yourself, but you can make a major impact in this world. And we've seen glimpses with other human beings. We've named a few of them, but I believe we all have the potential and the capacity to be on that level. It's just that, do we have the interest and the desire and the willpower to put ourselves on that path, and to work with changing ourselves, because change is one of the hardest things you can do, but I think it's necessary. If you really want to make an impact, I think you have to begin to look at, how is my root chakra? What's the condition of my thoughts when it comes to my stability? How do I feel emotionally? Do I have any confidence? Do I love people, or am I just a selfish individual? Am I able to communicate not only my truth, but do I have access to spiritual truth that I can articulate to someone else to enlighten another human being? You know, do I have insight and vision and understanding that goes above myself into the things that I don't know, that can answer the problems that I have in my life today? And am I making a difference? And you can never really answer any of those questions until you get on the spiritual path and begin to open those chakras and to allow that energy to flow through them and to benefit you and to benefit the world.
Right. And like I was saying about the trickle effect, you can be sitting there going, I have a belief, and I believe that these are, you know you can have a spiritual belief, and be strong in it, and believe that you can make a major impact on things. But if you're still stuck down in that root chakra, the impact that you're going to have with that belief is not going to be the same as the impact you would have if you was operating out of your crown chakra.
That's right. Because if you think about, being in a work environment as an example, right? You're in a work environment and you have this fight with a coworker all the time. You're butting heads with this person all the time. Now, on the one hand, you can have a meeting and they bring everybody together, and you say, okay, what's your issue? And then the person tells you their issue, and then you tell them your issue, and then you kind of just work through that meeting, but you leave the meeting, but nothing really changes. You shake hands and you walk off, but then a couple of days later, the same thing happens. But think of it this way. What if, instead of going to that person in that way, you've opened yourself up spiritually to now you can discern some things. Now you have access to see and understand what the dynamic is in the work environment that's causing that tension.
Right.
Then you can make real change, because then you will have found the root cause of the issue, which is more than likely not the person at all. Sometimes it is, but even if it is the person, there's something going on within that person that if you address that root, that will fix the entire problem.
Right.
But most of us never get to that point because we don't have the spiritual discernment to even begin to look at it through those eyes. We just kind of look at it, well, that person's a jerk, and we don't look at, okay, what's going on behind the scenes? But you really can't even look at what's going on behind the scenes, again, until you allow yourself to flow with spirit and you put yourself on a spiritual path and you work with how we're supposed to flow and how we're supposed to work.
Absolutely.
One other thing I want to add, Josh, and then we can close this out, is how to work with it, balancing your chakras, some things that you can do.
Absolutely.
And I'll give a few things, and then feel free to add things that you may have or some comments you'd like to make. But given that the chakras work with our thoughts, and they work with not only how we're thinking in the moment, but it works with our memory. It works with all the aspects of the soulish realm, our will, our intellect, and our mind. Meditation has been found to be one of the most powerful things to help open chakras. And what you do when you're meditating is, for example, if you want to address your root, you go and you sit in nature. You go and do what's called grounding. You sit with nature and you relax. You calm yourself down, and you begin to allow yourself just to breathe. And you clear your mind of all the stress, all the anxiety, and all of the things that have been in your mind, and you just allow for yourself to sit still. And when you're in that state of sitting still, when you begin to think about addressing your root chakra, you begin to think and meditate on, okay, I want to think about removing stress out of my life. So you begin to envision a life that has no stress. You begin to envision peace being in your life. You begin to envision and to meditate on how the things that you need are always available to you, and they come to you at the right time and at the right moment. That alleviates the fear. That allows that chakra to open up and for that energy to flow, because you are clearing the pathway. And I love that you use that avatar example of how that guru had that dirty water. When you are able to meditate and open your mind up and focus on how you want your life to be, and you begin to see yourself being stable and secure and protected and provided for, that opens you up for the universe to provide for your needs. That is why I believe Jesus said in the Bible, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, or your body, what you shall put on it. He said, if you seek first the kingdom of God, which I believe is seeking first how to work with spiritual principle, that those things will be added to your life. He never said go and seek after those things. He said those things will be added. And I think as you begin to get your mind in alignment and open those chakras up, you begin to heal those areas of your life, and those things are allowed then to be added to your life. Because at the end of the day, everything we want and need all reduces down to spirit.
Absolutely.
It all reduces down to energy. And energy is attracted just like magnets attract one another. So when your thoughts and your meditation is on repairing your root or any of your other chakras, you begin to envision the positive aspects of those chakras. You are opening them up and you're allowing that energy to flow. Okay, so meditation is one way. Another way is through crystals. And if you've done any work or any study with crystals at all, you'll know that crystals emit different frequencies and they vibrate at different frequencies, and they all have different metaphysical properties. So there are different crystals that work with different chakras.
Yep.
And oftentimes, an easy way to look at it is the color of the crystal will resonate with the color of the chakra that it works with.
We went into
So
that a little bit with Lauren Perkins a couple weeks ago. We did a show on crystals, and she touched on crystals and chakras.
nice. So, if you are meditating and you want to, maybe meditation is not your thing, consider crystals. Consider, going to a crystal shop and just looking at them and seeing what resonates with you, or ask questions and things of that nature. I have a lot of crystals. I'm surprised I don't have one on my desk here. Actually, Luke, it's my wife's. It's a tiny one. I don't know if you can see that, but I usually keep crystals around me all the time because I work with them well. They help balance my energy out. And so I think that's a good thing to practice is getting some good crystals that help you, and just exploring and finding out, when I have this particular crystal, what do I feel like? Or if I have a particular thought, when I grab this crystal, do I feel the change? Do I feel the energy of this crystal making any kind of a difference?
Right.
It's kind of an experimental thing, but it actually does work. So crystals are a good way. Aromatherapy is another, because you'd be amazed at how the things that we smell are linked biochemically to memories
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and
It's one
things
of
that
the
we
most
have.
powerful things that is linked to memory. A smell will trigger a memory faster than anything else.
Yeah. And so getting some good aromatherapy, where you get lavender or, frankincense, or any of those things that resonate with you, they deal with, it's another form of vibration. Remember I said earlier that the five physical senses translate vibration.
Mm-hmm.
So our sense of smell is picking up on the frequency of, like, a rose, for example. A rose gives out like 300 hertz of electrical charge. So you are receiving that in whenever you sniff a rose. That is going into your system and benefiting your body. And so aromatherapy, having things around when you're dealing with various chakras, if you're dealing with your roots, something that makes you feel grounded. When you have that smell, it does something to you on the inside. It makes you feel powerful. That is another thing to consider. And the last thing that I'll mention is Reiki. And I know we're going to do an entire show on Reiki. If you don't know what Reiki is a form of energy healing where a person who has gone through an initiation process with a Reiki master receives the ability to channel energy from the universe directly to the chakras of another person. And you don't have to be in front of the person to do that. You can do that at a distance, or you can do Reiki on yourself and balance your own chakras. Or you can go to a Reiki master and have them align your chakras for you. So Reiki is a very good way and a quick way to go and if your chakras are out of alignment, a good Reiki master will have you lie down on a table, and they'll either intuitively or through the use of like a pendulum or something, they will be able to go through and read and do a scan of all of your chakras and see which ones are functioning properly and which ones aren't. And by the time they do a Reiki session, they check you out again, and your chakras are flowing properly, and they have a way of telling you. So Reiki is another very good way. And when we get into the Reiki topic, I'll talk more about how Reiki works. But Reiki definitely works with the chakras, and it is a very good and fast way to have your chakras opened up. But you still have to, as with anything, maintain balance and keep the system going. Because going to a Reiki master once doesn't fix you for life.
Right. One thing I want to talk about real quick is breath work.
Yeah.
Breath work is very important. If you're into meditation, you usually know breath work. But excuse me, one of the simple things that you can do breath work to help bring things into balance, and this will bring things into balance in your body. In so many different aspects, is what's known as the 5-5-5. Breathe in for 5, hold it for 5, breathe out for 5, and use that and do that mindfully, breathing mindfully with that. Breathe in for 5, hold it for 5, breathe out for 5. I've used this technique with people who are experiencing anxiety to help calm them, and it is really effective to help bring them back to a calm, centered state. And that's what it does with anyone when you start working with breath work. And one of the things that I can tell people, if you're not going to do a meditation practice, at least do mindful breath work. And that's something that you can just, take some time while you're going through your day. If you're sitting there at the computer and you're working, you're typing up some reports, or you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, editing, whatever it is, you can do that mindful breath work, and it doesn't have to distract you from anything else. Once you get into the habit of doing it, in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5.
I love that you brought that up, Josh, because as I was stating earlier, I named, my platform that I teach, putting on the new you.
Mm-hmm.
And with new, I pulled from the word pneuma, which deals with spirit. And spirit totally and completely deals with what's called the breath of life.
Absolutely.
And when you deal with the martial arts, they deal with chi or with ki. That is dealing with vital force energy, but is often channeled through your breath work. When you deal with any aspects of yoga, you're dealing with breathing, but that breathing is dealing with prana, which is life force energy
Right.
that you're taking in and channeling through your breathing. It's all spirit. It's like, spirit electricity that you're sending throughout your being. So I love that you landed on that one, because I think there's a perfect way to tie the knot of taking things from the natural and intermingling them with the spirit, because they're connected and they can't be inseparable. They can't be inseparable.
Absolutely.
Because they're so closely joined together. So something that we do without even thinking about it is breathing. But when you do it intentionally, you are allowing for that source and that vital life energy to flow more regularly, and you can control the flow of it, and you're benefiting your entire system.
And when you're doing it, when you're doing that mindful breathing, when you're doing that 5-5-5 breathing, when you're breathing in for 5, holding for 5, and breathing out for 5, you're doing it in a mindful manner, but you're bringing control and stability into your system. And that's what helps bring things into alignment. It's taking that chaos that might be going on. And it was funny, my guest on Tuesday even mentioned it. He talked about breathing techniques and stuff then too. And he was talking about smokers and how smokers smoke. They're and they're taking these quick breaths, and it's the same way that happens when you're having an anxiety attack. You're taking these really quick breaths, and you're not able to control it. And one of the first things that, when I started dealing with anxiety and stuff, I dealt with anxiety and panic attacks. One of the first things that I latched onto that truly worked, the doctors wanted to give me all kinds of medications and stuff, which would just knock me out, and I wasn't living life. I was just comatose. I was a zombie. I wasn't functional. I wasn't living life. I was just literally drugged out.
It's existing.
And yeah, I was just here. I wasn't living. I wasn't thriving. I was simply surviving at that point in time. But when I learned that I could control the anxiety and keep the anxiety in check through things like breath work and meditation and mindfulness techniques and stuff, but breath work being the key, being the main go-to. And I deal with chronic pain issues. When my pain spikes, first thing I go to is breath work. It's been no secret that I'm currently dealing with an abdominal hernia. It's been mentioned on the show a few times and stuff, and most viewers know that I've been dealing with it. When I have really bad issues with it, the first thing I start doing is focusing on my breath work. And even if it gets to the point where I have to go to the hospital to have them help me with issues revolving around it. While I'm sitting there on the gurney in the hospital, the one thing I'm doing is breath work. I'm trying to control my heart rate. I'm trying to control everything. I'm trying to keep that blood pressure down, keep that from spiking, trying to keep the pain in check through using breath work. These things are techniques that are taught deeply, like you mentioned martial arts. These are taught deeply in martial arts. This is a way you control your body. It's a way you bring yourself into alignment. In martial arts, they talk about breath work. When you get ready to go into combat, your breath work is critical.
That's right.
If your breath work, if you're breathing real erratic, you're breathing, those shallow breaths like I was talking about, like how a smoker would do, taking puffs off a cigarette. If you're breathing like that and you're not controlling your breath, you're not taking, a good breath in, oxygen, getting that oxygen into your lungs, which is getting it into your muscles, which is getting the blood pumping, getting everything flowing and bringing everything into alignment in your body, you're not going to be able to function at your peak performance that you need to when you're in that combat situation. And that's what martial artists work on. And they work at being at peace and in a state of zen while even in combat. That is one of the key elements that you see throughout almost all martial arts. Is being in that state of control in the midst of total chaos.
It's like one of the things that I heard best is when the body is at rest, the spirit is alive and awakened. And a good martial artist, like Bruce Lee is my favorite for a lot of different reasons, but he often talked about the subconscious mind and how he would kick a bag 1,000 times, the same kick. Just do one kick 1,000 times. And what he was doing was conditioning his subconscious so that when he got into an actual fight, he would relax himself. And subconsciously, when he threw that kick, he had thrown it so many times, he would instinctively throw it with as much force as he could. And it would be more damaging than anything he'd ever done because he conditioned himself when he was training to throw that kick 1,000 times as hard as he could. But then when he's in a fight, he's relaxed. And then when the time comes, he throws that kick without even thinking about it.
Yeah, it's just pure muscle memory. The minute the minute that the idea for that to happen comes into his mind, it happens.
Yep.
It's pure response. I mean, when you talk about martial artists like Bruce Lee getting into that state, they talk about getting into a flow state, and that flow state comes from being in, that flow state starts with breath work. It starts with controlling the breathing, which controls the body, which controls the heart rate, which controls the mind, which controls everything. And
which is all linked to the chakras.
Absolutely. And so it all flows in together. It's all connected. It's that circuit that we was talking about in the beginning, that when you have everything in that circuit aligned and everything is flowing right, it works. But if one little pathway in that circuit is blocked or damaged, the whole thing can shut down. You might, or if it's not, fully damaged, but it's just, messed up a little bit, you can get that trickle effect that's coming through, and it might work here or there, but it's not going to work all the time.
And I think, the importance of, like those people we talked about, like the Mother Teresas and the Gandhis of the world, they live this stuff day in and day out. And, I wish that they were still around to where we could have a conversation with them and just ask them about their normal day, and I'll bet that they saw things and experienced things on a whole nother level that most human beings don't, because of the vibration that they, resonated with all the time, because they conditioned themselves to walk on the spiritual plane.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's my goal. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I'm working on it. And so hopefully, with what we've shared tonight, that, the audience will be inspired to at least look a little deeper into the chakras and learn some things about themselves that they can, begin to address and just, begin to see some things a little bit different. Absolutely. So I think if we encourage at least one person to do that we did our job tonight.
And I think we will. I think we've done that, and I think the show will do that and continue to do that. And if anything, I think that we may have given people maybe a better perspective of what the chakras are, because they are kind of this mystical thing that a lot of people are like, ooh, chakras, you know, um, this really kind of, while they seem to be becoming more mainstream, because we're seeing things like what you talked about, like in Doctor Strange, they talked about the chakras, so
Mhm.
we're seeing mainstream media starting to bring these concepts to the masses, but most people don't truly understand what they are. And so hopefully tonight with the conversation, we've been able to kind of open that door a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, and if I may, Josh, before we close, I'll show
Absolutely.
this book. This is one of my favorite books. I don't know if the audience can see this here.
I can see it clearly.
It's Your Aura and Your Chakras.
Yep.
This is a very good book. Pick that one up. It goes into a lot of detail, a lot of what we covered tonight, um, especially when it deals with the chakras and how they all work, and goes into a little bit more information that we had time to share tonight. So I highly recommend that book as well, as a resource too. I think it does a very good breakdown of things, because I have several books on chakras, but this is one of my favorites.
Excellent. Well, Melvin, I want to say thank you for being here tonight. It's been a pleasure having you on the show again, and this has definitely been an enlightening conversation. I've highly enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, thank you for being here. And I want to let people know Melvin will be back with us on June 17th. We're going to be continuing this discussion, probably going a little more into chakras, maybe, and definitely starting to go into Kundalini energies and stuff, and probably on into discussing Reiki a little more as well. And
No
so
doubt.
that's what we got coming up on June 17th. And but yeah, thank you for being here tonight, Melvin. Real quick before we do close out, does anybody have any questions? Because normally we open up the floor to questions, and we didn't do that tonight. But we're getting close to pushing 3 hours right now.
Whoa.
We're at 2 hours and 46 minutes currently.
All this talking you've been doing, Josh, you got to stop.
I know. I just ramble on and on and on. But while we're waiting to see if there's any questions from anyone, I do want to let people know that on Tuesday, June 1st, Nellie Williams Smith is going to be our guest, and we're going to be discussing following your intuition. And on June 3rd, Liz Foy will be our guest, and we're going to be discussing issues when the healing process is rushed and energetic boundaries. On June 8th, Judy and Tim Burrows will be on. Judy was on. Miss Judy, we talked about spiritual cleansing. She's coming back, and she's bringing her husband on the show with her. And we're going to be discussing on Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. And then on the 10th, Mary Gooseman is going to be with us again. She was the death doula who was on the show, and we're going to be discussing grief and how to work and heal through it. So that's some of the next shows that's coming up. So, and I'm not seeing any questions from any of the viewers. I think we pretty much covered a lot of everything that happened. And if anyone's watching this on YouTube and you have questions, ask them down in the comments. We'll get them answered. We'll respond to them. But once again, Melvin, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's always a pleasure spending time with you, getting to chat with you, and having these conversations. And I look forward to many, many more in the future. And real quick, we do have to plug, you and me are working on a men's group, and hopefully that will be coming out real soon. So pay attention to the Discord and the Facebook pages and stuff, and we will let you know when that is going to come out. But
Awesome. And thanks again, brother, for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to chat, and I'm looking forward to when we get to do this again with the audience.
absolutely, and we will talk to you guys soon. And once again, thank you, Melvin, for being here, and we will see you all on Tuesday. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.